Oh, I want that. Yeah. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, June 20th meeting of the Town of Richmond Select Board. Would anybody like to make a public comment about anything not on the agenda?
I would.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'd like to give a shout out to Pete Goslin and the road crew. The Ridge Street project with the curbs and the sidewalks and the paving are just outstanding. They really dressed up the whole town. They did a fabulous job. Really like, what are they called? Sharon's,
Sharers, the bright
Sharers, whatever they are. The painting of the bicycles on the street and the painting of the 25 mph on the street. Really like that. And I think they've done a fabulous job.
Ian?
I had a couple questions about Dugway Road. As far as I knew, there was some no parking signs that were going to go up. I was wondering if you knew what the status of that was.
I don't, but I'll follow up with Pete.
Denise?
I have two things. I think it was January, February, when I was at the select board meeting, I had asked when the memorial for the family of the bridge in Jonesville was going to be put back up. That is still not up. I heard it's at the highway department. That's what I was told in January or February. And just curious if we can get that up and do it in a really nice way. The former one was beautiful. And I believe you've already ordered the new one. It's here and it has been, but it has not been put back up, and just wondering what the delay is.
That's the bridge plaque, right?
Right, it was a beautiful bit, it
Yeah,
was
I
a
think
cement
I
one.
think we have the original plaques.
They had it cleaned up and taken care of. Yes, they were just trying to decide what.
You
to mount
said,
it
you
on.
said new one though.
Okay, well,
Okay, so.
new revised one.
Okay, I'll follow up with Pete on that one too.
And the second thing, and I apologize that I don't have a physical copy to show you. On South Burlington's Front Porch Forum, there was an invitation for people to come to Richmond for the Trails Committee meeting. And I'm curious if that was something that was sanctioned by your board. And I don't have the author, and I will get that to you. I will forward it to Josh as soon as I get it. I'm still waiting. But I'm just curious if that's something that we did, and why is that going out to South Burlington residents to come to Richmond to the Trails Committee meeting to see what we have to offer?
First I've heard of it.
It's sort of an extraneous comment. At the Public Andrews Community Forest meeting up at the school, there were a number of residents of other towns who came to express their opinions about Andrews Community Forest as well. So it's not unprecedented for what that's worth.
But I guess for us to be putting the invitation out on a public forum in South Burlington.
I doubt it.
So Jay, I will get you the actual copy of the letter from Front Porch Forum in South Burlington, and then you can do with what you want.
Yeah, if it was a member of the Trails Committee, it'd be good to know. If it was just some random member of the public, it'd be good to know. Well, but yes, if you can get us that would be great.
I will. Thank you.
David?
Just want to share Pete's memo. So Pete Goslin, the highway foreman, sent this memo to me and asked me to share it with the select board. The recently completed Bridge Street project could not have been possible without the help of the water and sewer department staff. While milling surface asphalt, the paving contractor FW Whitcomb hit two box valve assemblies. One of these operates the Railroad Street water line, and it was severely damaged. Well, we could have just said the contractor is responsible for all of the repairs and postponed the finishing paving of Bridge Street. I knew this would involve an outside excavation contractor and oversight from the water department, as well as a newly unknown schedule of completion. I met with Steve and Brad on site and organized a plan of repair. The water department made this a high priority, dropped what they were doing, and went to their supplier to pick up a new box valve assembly. This repair required a 4-foot deep excavation. Fortunately, the water valve and the lower section of the valve box were undamaged. Together, both departments were able to do this work and reopen this lane on Bridge Street in 2 hours. The value of this work was traded for an asphalt street repair on Tilden Avenue. This was a win-win for everyone. Again, I really appreciate the timeliness and the efforts made by Steve, Brad, and Alan at the water treatment.
Here.
So, thank you. And just to piggyback on what Jeff opened, I loved the post in Front Porch Forum that said driving down Bridge Street was like driving through nice communities in northern Vermont with good roads. So thank you.
Immediately before the meeting, Ian, do you still have something?
Yeah, I had one other question on the Dugway.
ahead.
Sorry, I didn't get it in first time. Is there a defined plan as to who will be patrolling this road or Dugway Road and what the frequency might be?
So at this point, it'll be Hinesburg PD doing the parking enforcement. We haven't established an exact schedule with them on that, but any parking enforcement in the foreseeable future will be done by Hinesburg.
And so if there's like a car blocking the road or somebody's driveway, can a resident call a towing company or does a police officer have to do that?
Really sure there's still have to be a police officer for that. So you probably want to call, if you call online, you can get a line over to Hinesburg and get them directly as
Okay.
well.
Thanks.
My apologies
just
for
part of
missing you the
Hinesburg.
first time, Ian.
No, that's
Good.
okay.
Just a random comment, having driven down Dugway today, I noted that there was more than one car parked in the traveled portion of the highway for what that's worth.
Can I piggyback on that as well? I came down from Middlebury, cut across down Dugway, and there were at least 6 cars illegally parked.
I'll
So
let,
it's begun.
yep, I'll let Hinesburg know that we should, these patrols there now.
It's a sure sign of summer.
I don't know if Andy can.
I'm not.
Absolutely.
We can check.
What was that question?
It's not having to write the ticket, it's just to be authorized to call to have a vehicle towed.
Follow-up item, please.
Mhm. Okay, last thing.
Okay, can I ask one more question? While we're on that subject.
Uh-huh.
Could the select board, because of our police staffing right now, could the select board authorize a specific towing company? And they know the rules and regulations, have them take a picture every time, you guys authorize them so that people could, like Ian said, they block driveways, they block private roads. So is it possible that we could have a particular towing company that knows the parameters of when a car gets towed, that a citizen could call the towing company and say, there's 3 cars up there right now?
It's a,
Instead of, and then, we could self-help, especially the people that live in that area.
we'll have to check on the legalistics of it because I think that legally we have to have a police officer issue the order to tow, but we'll check.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, immediately before the meeting, Carol Bounty made a request that we reorder the agenda a little bit so that people here for certain topics would not have to stay till 3 in the morning. Those items are H, L, and M on your agenda. H is the setting the cost of living increase for the wage grid. L is discussion of using police Tesla as volunteer-driven intermittent public transportation. And M is update on town-owned equipment to be sold or traded in. Does anybody have any objection to moving those up higher in the agenda, perhaps between C and D? Okay, we'll move the 3 I've highlighted here after C. Okay. Bart,
Are we on item 2, additions or deletions?
we are. That's essentially why I did that. Do you have anything else you want to add or delete?
This is an awkward one, or it's a little ironic, but perhaps we should frame that as additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda in future addendums.
That sounds good to me. Okay, our first item we're now moving up to items for presentation. Our first item on the agenda tonight is an update on our reappraisal process. Lisa, if you'd like to come up and tell us how it's going.
So we sent out all the notices and we had a week-long informal meetings with people, and we saw about 200 Richmond residents in that 1 week period. And we were able to address a lot of it, just simple things like, oh, the square footage is wrong. I don't have a finished basement. My roof type is wrong. That type of thing, which we did at that period, and then sent them change notices again saying, okay, after this meeting, here's your value now. And then we spent a week doing grievance hearings Monday through Thursday, and we sent out 67. Had 67 grievance hearings, and those are all done. So we sent out those notices. And of the 67 notices sent out, those are the people that are eligible to go before the Board of Civil Authority about the reappraisal change notices and assessment. And we had 3 go to the DCA for the year. So our previous grand list, no, did you have this, Josh? I sent an email.
Yeah, I don't have it.
So our previous grand list was. It's expressed as a mill rate, so just move the decimal point over 2 places if you choose. So it was 4,830,53.62, and our new grand list is 7,812,184.64. So the grand list increased 61.74% as a result, but it had been 15 years, so that seems very reasonable. So what's going to happen now is our education taxes. So what the state does on they calculate a reappraisal CLA, and it's only for the purposes of setting the education tax rate. And what they do is they take.
Yeah, I've got it up. If that's helpful, Lisa. Lisa. Sorry, I don't know if that's helpful.
I can see that any better.
Okay, just so you know what I'm sharing.
I have some everywhere. So what they do is they take our new grand list that we created and they divide it by the state's version of our 2022 state equalized education tax rate. And that's where you get the 1.1498, which would be our I expect that to be the CLA, but we don't have actual numbers from the state yet. So when they set the education tax rate, that's how it would be adjusted.
Could you explain that?
So
I'm just gonna say, so, is that multiplier 1.1498?
they take what your education tax would be with no CLA and they divide it by that number.
So can we cut to the chase?
Sure.
So first, the 61.74%, if that's the grand list total, that also represents, does it not, the average increase for the average property?
All things being average. But that also includes current use. That also includes utilities, which have always been valued at fair market value. So there's certain
There's some
outliers.
modifiers. So where I was going is if people are trying to judge how their property, because if my property goes up 60% and everybody else's goes up 70%, my taxes might actually drop for the town because everybody else went up faster. So my question is there an average actual property tax increase that people could use to judge their own future property taxes? Is it higher or lower than that?
So this is an average and it's always an average and nothing's average. Some places went up higher by a lot. Some places increased very little. Commercial didn't increase as much as residential. There's all kinds of variables in that.
Do you understand my mathematical point though?
I do understand your mathematical point. So what we explain to people is if your spending stayed level in your town and your grand list increased, ergo proportionately, your tax rate would decrease.
And also my taxes, if my property goes up 50% and everybody else goes up 70%, mine decrease compared to everybody else's.
Right, and that's where everything.
So that's why I'm asking, is there an average property tax or is there an average grand list value increase for the properties that actually are taxed?
Per parcel. So this only represents, the grand list only represents taxable parcels.
That's
It
my
doesn't,
question.
it doesn't represent any inactive or town-owned properties are not part of the grand
That's my
list.
question. So should people be using the 61.74? You understand my question? I'm saying, what is the benchmark for the average increase that people can compare themselves to?
So the grand list increased 61.74%.
Does anybody else understand my
So I
question?
think, so Lisa, I guess my question would be, if the amount of money to be raised was the same in FY 24 as it is in FY 23, right? And the average increase is 61% of the rate list. If your house also went up 61%, your taxes would be about the same. But if it went up 50%, you'd be paying less, and if it went up 70%, you'd be paying more.
Correct.
Is that?
But I don't have a number for the ad, so if I were to calculate that, it wouldn't be this way. It would say, here's all the parcels. What was the average for you? What was the average for you? What was the average for you? And then find the average of those individual changes. Sounds like what you want to know.
No,
I think, okay, in part, I think he's saying that if somebody looks at their increase and goes, well, I went up 33%, they go, oh my God, I'm dead. But if they find out that actually that's substantially less than the average increase, they're like, oh, I'm in clover.
I'm not dead.
I'm not dead.
There you
Because
go.
it's all relative is my point. So that's the benchmark. And I guess in the absence of anything else, the reference point is 61.74 is
Correct.
about the middle.
That would be the proportion, if your spending was level, that would be the proportion you would expect to have the tax rate decrease as well.
And then my other question is, because people are going to say, well, based on this, what happens to my state education taxes? Is our town paying more or less in state education taxes than if they did before?
And the issue with that, and I understand what you're asking, and it's not a simple answer, because there's so many variables that go into what your state education tax rate is. It's got to do with the yield rate. It's got to do with what's your pupil population. Has it increased? Has it decreased? How does that affect your per
Let's
pupil
assume it's
spending?
last year. All those things are the same. as
If everything was equal, I would expect the education tax rate to go up. Not the tax rate, but the tax liability from the taxes to go up slightly, but not the 67%.
What would you estimate that percent to be?
I wouldn't.
Okay. Any other questions from the select board for Lisa? Jeff?
One of the things that I did with the spreadsheet was really quite helpful. Because then you could sort it, and then it could do whatever with it. So I looked at land values, just land, things that were labeled land. And they went up on average 80 to 85%. The median was about 83%. And, then you could get more fine grains, parcels of land between 25 and 100 acres versus larger parcels, but it's all in that range. It's all in the 80% for land, just land. And I suspect that you could slice and dice this in a number of different ways and come up with a different average or median. My takeaway from looking at it is that it was somewhere between 60 and 80%, average, median, whatever way you want to slice it. And that would make sense to me, what's it been, 15 years?
15. Mhm.
Since we've done that, that would make sense to me. I get what she's saying as far as the education tax. I don't know if anybody understands how they calculate the education tax. I know it was extremely difficult on the school board to try to figure out what that was going to be. And even after the fact, it was extremely difficult to understand what it was. Bottom line is that the more kids you have, the more money you get from the state for paying for your schools, which is why we should be interested in families.
Mhm.
Things are different now that we have a statewide property tax, particularly with commercial property, because our commercial taxes go to the state and then get redistributed. So I understand it is complicated, and that's about as far as I understand it.
So the other thing with the land values is you're not necessarily, it's the same thing as like this guy's house went up 200%. Oh, that's right, because before it was raw land and now it's land in a house.
Right.
And the same thing as somebody else's land might have gone up higher percentage wise, but he might have also created an extra lot. The same thing that somebody might have had property that was valued straight, and in the meantime, they have then sold all the development rights or done a conservation easement, so that would drop. So there's lots of variables that go into what that value is on a specific time frame. It's not this was this, and now just because of the reappraisal and the cost tables, we have a straight line change. Does that make sense?
Lisa, David, any questions? Okay, Kara?
Thing we were talking about was probably be driven by building permit, which would change every year. Building permit drives the change in the grand list by the assessor. So that's not a 15-year change. It's a yearly thing. The 15-year change is more in line if you haven't had any building permits in the last 15 years. So just to make sure we're clear, the CLA is I just want, Lisa, if you can explain to me again, because I'm not sure if I heard it correctly. Is the 1.1498 anything to do with the CLA?
It is the one-time reappraisal CLA that the state calculates to equalize the grand list for education taxes only.
So it's a one-time, so it's happening for this grand list.
It is theoretically, to my understanding, the CLA that will be used to adjust the state education tax rate as the CLA is every year.
Okay, so the CLA, before we started our reappraisal, gets triggered at the, 85% mark? And so now we're at 114%? Is that what that 1.14 is?
The 1.14 is the mathematical product of taking where we are on our grand list right now and dividing it by the state's equalized education grand list from last year.
Okay, so if we were at 85% triggered.
Actually, last year, the CLA that they reported to us
Was 70
was 70%.
Okay, so if we were at 70% last year, but we triggered the reappraisal when we dipped below 85% and we went a year early, or than dipping below the 85%. If the CLA was 70% last year, can you tell me what the percentage is with the grand list one time, what that is in a percentage, not in the decimal point?
I don't understand your question.
What is the CLA? If we were 70% last year, what is the CLA this year?
We don't have that official number from the state yet because they haven't set it up to do. So what they do after the reappraisal, we have, here's all the new numbers, here's all the new values. So the state says, okay, based on the sales from the last 3 years, they calculated our CLA based on the values we had before the reappraisal. So after the reappraisal, they say, here's all the sales again, and here's the new values. Where are they falling assessment to new value? And that's yet to be calculated or set up.
What months do they usually provide the CLA?
For a reappraisal town, the CLA that we are going to live by, we will get in December of 2023.
Okay, that's, I didn't know if this was the
No,
CLA.
that's
When
that
you said
one.
It was a one-time CLA. I didn't know what the one-time CLA meant.
It's simply for calculating our education tax
Okay.
rate.
So we'll get the new actual live true CLA December 2023 for the next year.
We'll get a 3-year sales equalized CLA next
Well,
December.
every year it's a 3-year equalized
Right.
CLA. Just like you went from 85% to 70%. Every year you get that. So we're
Yeah.
gonna get it in December. And the only reason I'm asking this is because that CLA, everybody needs to realize, is the calculation that's put upon the town tax base for calculating your state tax. So when you dip below the 85%, you're forced into reappraisal. And when you go above and Lisa, you can correct me, I don't know what that is, maybe 120%, you then have to it triggers a reappraisal on the other end of things. So that's why I'm trying to
Right.
see where we're landing with our CLA in comparison to the rest of the state.
Looking at our sales for next year, I suspect, but I'm not making any, it's just an estimate, knowing what I know and what we're looking at, that the CLA will probably land somewhere between 95 and 105.
So Lisa, thanks very much. We appreciate your coming. I just like to include for the people listening at home that we do have, after the grievance process that Lisa outlined earlier, we do have 3 hearings for the Board of Civil Authority. And those members of the Select Board present are members of the BCA should you wish to take part. Our initial hearing will be on July 12th here at the town center. And then after we hear from the property owners and from Lisa, we will then conduct site visits And we have scheduled on July 31st, the follow-up, at which we may, but are not certain to announce the outcomes. So July 16th, excuse me, July 12th and July 31st, if you're updating your calendar. Okay, Kara?
I have a question for the select board. This isn't for Lisa. It's not the Lisa part of the reappraisal. It was the question that I brought up six or 8 months, 8 or 10 months ago, in regards to how the data has driven changes that were unpermitted and what the town has got for the plan for the unpermitted changes in properties and the enforcement of such. And that data was going to be the next round of data released by to us, so that your zoning administrative officer and your town planner could possibly start to weed through that information. And do you all I know Lisa wasn't on the board before back then. Understand what I'm talking about.
Am I correct in recalling that you're referring to improvements that should have been permitted but were not permitted,
Correct,
as opposed to improvements that were not permitted and did not need to be permitted?
correct.
And you created a list from the original grand list, and then we'll have a new list. We can compare those lists. They're quite in-depth and complicated, but we've got the lists, or we will have the new.
You will
list,
have the list, yeah.
Once the appraisal is finalized.
And as soon as, I think at this point, as soon as I turn, right now, we have still a working grand list, and my goal is next week to create the 2023 as-built grand list. And once we have that, we can take a snapshot in time of the CAMA. And that's the only time, because we have the CAMA data, but it's not set up. So here's a snapshot of it on this day, and here's a snapshot on it that day. So we're going to do it as soon as we create the as-built 2023, then I will export all the CAMA data into a spreadsheet, and you can slice and dice it at will. And then I also have the same data from the 2008, which was also the assessment data from 2022. And so you can do that comparison, and that's a simple. Creating the spreadsheet simple, it's dealing with it.
Jeff,
Another issue.
The one thing that I
Wait.
don't forget, this has to be the same thing. though.
Jeff is on the select board. He gets to speak first. Jeff, go ahead.
So as I understand, we have something in the order of 1,600 properties in town. Is that about right?
Do I want to think 17 something?
17 something, and so it's in that.
Improved properties, it's less than that, and land properties.
And you had 200 people come and ask questions.
Mhm.
And then there was another process where they grieved with you.
At a formal grievance hearing,
How
yeah.
many were there?
67,
67. And from that process, we have 3 that are going to the DCA.
correct.
Right.
Okay,
And that's all they're going to be.
that sounds like a terrific success to me. How does that rate with other small rural towns?
We expect usually to get 5 to 10% come to the informal hearings, which we did.
Yeah.
A little bit more than that, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's been a really long time, so you expect the numbers to be slightly higher.
Yeah.
And then we expect to get another 10 to 20% of those, so we were just slightly higher again.
Uh-huh.
But that's because of, I think the time frame had a lot to do with it. And people are more, people have more skin in the game when you're talking about property values now.
Yeah.
And also the way we had the information available and easy to find online, and doing the NIMRIC info and being able to see all those records and being able to sit and take care of that. So people got a lot of information, they got a lot of knowledge, and they came in and asked a lot of questions, and we were able to clarify a lot of information, and everybody is better off for knowing how the system works, because knowledge is power.
So I feel good about this process. And I know what it's like going through the BCA process. It's a quasi judicial process.
Mhm.
It's town residents who will be making a decision on grievances from other town residents, and I think it's a really good process, but I would call this a success.
Denise?
Could you roughly tell us how many properties do you think had additions that were unpermitted? Was
I
it
have
over
no- I
25?
have no idea.
You have no idea. Okay,
We'll try to get that number when we do the
okay,
comparison.
thank you.
Okay,
The point of the data was just to make sure is the last time the assessors were at the property to inspect, not during the reappraisal, but prior to that, because you're going to have to also filter based on permits that were actually issued. So there's a
Okay,
couple of pieces in there. I just don't want you to forget any of the pieces. And
okay,
thank you.
And we have preserved all the sheets we created for the pre.
Oh, I know you guys were, this wasn't about you guys.
But we preserved that, so whoever ends up digging through all that information should be able to see something in it. So we don't have them available for people to go through to get, but we have preserved them. They're all ordered by Banker Box, so people can grab them.
Thank
Okay,
you. I
so-
really appreciate all
yeah.
your work. Thank you.
okay. So thank you again, Lisa, and thank you, townspeople for asking questions. Let's move on to our next item on the agenda. Next item on the agenda is consideration of approving a vendor for assessor services. And I'd like to summarize for those people listening in the audience and at home who don't have the memo. Richmond has contracted for assessing services with NIMRIC for about the past 9 years. NIMRIC had been recently charging an annual fee of $24,000. In the fall of 2022, NIMRIC notified us that they would be changing their billing structure to hourly, and that based on their calculations, we would probably be spending about $30,000, which would be an increase. The FY24 budget was increased to $31,000 to accommodate this. Now, obviously, we would want to go out to bid and see if somebody else could beat that rate. We posted the RFP, we sent it directly to 6 firms, got no bids. We did get an email from NIMRIC, basically repeating the $30,000 estimate. Since we got no other bids, we extended the bid period by 2 weeks, and we reached out to the firms we originally reached out to, and again, got no bids. So the recommendation from our town manager, since we only really have one option, is to enter into an agreement with NIMRIC for assessing services for FY24 at an amount not to exceed $30,000. Josh will work out the specifics of the agreement so we can have this in place in July. NIMRIC has always done a good job. We were just interested in getting a better rate, but that's not an option apparently. So there, if people have any questions, feel free, or otherwise there is a motion in the packet. Lisa?
Did they give any reasons for not bidding or not even responding? Well, if they gave you a reason, they responded.
So I didn't hear from any of the companies that didn't bid. And I think the way that we had structured, we were asking for more of a lump sum. And Nemrick was like, well, this is the way we proposed to do it essentially. So, and I think they were like 3 hours late with the first one. So they didn't deliver it exactly the right way, but barring any other bids, we sort of have one option here.
Have we used any of those prior companies in the past?
No, since we changed from listers to assessors, is my understanding, we've been with Nemrick for the last 10+ years.
Okay, I think they've solidified their position, I mean, regionally.
But that said, if anybody in town is looking to get into a new line of business.
Yeah, right.
I just have a comment about contacts from another organization that put out an RFP for an auditor. They got one response. And so I think that's the kind of thing that's starting to happen. There are fewer organizations doing some of the public sector work.
They're gonna breed competition because prices will just keep going up. When you don't have competition, that will generate competition, but isn't there yet.
It's a staffing.
Okay, so would anybody like to make the motion that's in the packet? Oh, I'm sorry, Denise, go ahead.
Okay, before you make a motion, I just want to bring something up. We also, in your office, are short-staffed, and they have just recently, the professional firm that we hired, who has the knowledge in what they've just done, has done all the work. They've seen all the people, the houses that have illegally done work, not been permitted. I'm wondering if there's a possibility that we could maybe hire them for them to come up with a new appraised value, or that they have the new appraised value, but for them to list the property owners, what, how much they, their property appraisal went up based on the part that was unpermitted, and have them make a recommendation on what the fine should be. I mean, they've already done most of the work. You heard her, it's in the banker's boxes. And we're short-staffed in the office anyway. See if we could hire them hourly to do that piece, to get it taken care of, maybe make some money on all the tax revenue that the town has lost over who knows how many, 15 years possibly.
Pay them a percentage of those proceeds.
Exactly.
So
It's not a fine, it's just a double the permit.
yeah, and I think it. But I think there's some statutory things in there that the only kind of anybody can do the research and bring it to the zoning administrator's attention, but then he has to be involved in that process of reaching out, and there's a process to go through. And I don't think you can just look at like the value, you have to look at, okay, they had a porch, but they didn't have a porch back then, now they do. So you have to kind of comb through the data pretty specifically. But I could ask if they can do it. In the past, they've really not been interested in working on that level of the data. I don't think, it's not like you go in there and go, oh, clearly that's an unpermitted shed. Like, I don't think it just jumps
No, I
out.
guess my question is, Kara, correct? Is it just a double permit fee?
Yes, that's the fee if you get caught with.
That's
Yeah.
it. There's no other fine or penalty.
What's in our ordinance, I believe, yep.
Okay,
So
on this,
that would seem like,
Yeah, and I don't know how widespread it is that people are doing work without permits. I mean, we can try to track it down through this data, but even tracking it down through this data, it's
right,
a bit of a bear.
but the item on the agenda right now is the agreement with Nemrick, not unpermitted usage. So let's get back to the agenda.
I move to approve entering into an agreement with Nemrick for assessor fees, assessor services for fiscal year 2024, an amount not to exceed $30,000 for the fiscal year.
I'll second.
Okay, who did,
Give it to Dave.
David? Okay.
This is David, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff Forward, seconded by David Sander to move to approve entering into an agreement with Nemrick for assessor services for fiscal year 24 at an amount not to exceed $30,000 for the fiscal year. Is there any further comment or discussion? Seeing none, please state your name. Go ahead, Lisa.
In this, looking at I hadn't seen this before, in the agreement with Nemrick, there's a valuation, it slipped here. They are establishing, what did I see it, but
What
establishing
page are you
the
on?
value, well, let's say one. There are no page numbers I can find. 2, 3, 4. I was looking at the boxes. I think page 4, second from the bottom.
Okay,
Valuation of the properties. Well, if that's going to include something done illegally, are they going to separate that out? Or we just gloss over it and then really can't find it? And if we're hiring them to do this, can't we put that on them
So
to
that's-
find?
Current use valuation, I think, is that what you're looking at? Or,
Yeah,
so like, I guess, so
Fine.
my, and maybe my understanding of it is throughout their annual work that they would do here, right? When somebody gets a permit for work, they'll get that permit from zoning, they'll go out to the property, they'll see that that work has been completed, they'll put a value on that.
Right.
The mysterious sort of part that's harder to track down is someone just does something, they don't.
it's there and then backtracking.
Right, but so the only time that they would go and check that is during the reappraisal. And at that point, they're not necessarily gonna know, was there or was there not a permit for this, was it or
Right,
wasn't
there's-
there?
Yeah,
So,
there's no joiner.
right, so that's where looking at the lists and the data maybe can help with that, but like in your average year, you're not gonna pick that up because they're not visiting every property to do scratch.
Right. Because it's kind of the once in a while chance.
During the full reappraisal, yeah, and in my understanding, there's not a real good way to immediately flag when they're going through it to say, oh, that's changed since the beginning, you didn't have a permit.
Is there a record of photographs at each appraisal that somebody could pour back through?
It-
I mean, if there's something
Yeah.
easy, you look and it's a 5-bedroom, the last one, 3-bedroom.
Well, yeah, I don't know that. I think looking at the data is probably our best bet.
Yeah.
Photographs maybe don't tell it, but even the data is gonna be, because there could be mathematical errors, like, oh, it's off by 100 square feet. Was it was it a rounding error before? Like, so there could be a lot to wade into, but we're gonna try.
Okay, well, I just wanted to ask. a
Yeah.
question.
okay, anything else? Okay, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Art, aye.
And J.I. Our next item on the agenda is presentation of the Richmond Walkability Audit Report. Kathleen Gent, Chris Cole, and John Cart. Let's see. I see John and Kathleen. Chris, are you online or? I do not see Chris, but we have John and Kathleen.
Chris is here.
So, we're all ears.
Okay, thank you. Let me get a couple things set up here. First, and who's on the phone, but can do I have sharing? Yes, I do. Okay, let me get this to okay. Now, 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 okay. Now There we go. I think we got it.
John, could you tip your laptop lid back just an inch? Thank you.
Okay.
And could you minimize the gallery so?
Now let's see what happens. If I shift. Okay, we're gonna have to do a little bit of flipping back
Yeah,
and forth here for a minute.
Yeah, there.
For my nose there.
And then you can,
Okay.
there you go.
Okay. Okay, thank you for this opportunity to speak with you tonight and present the Transportation Committee's latest report. We're hoping it meets your pleasure and that you'll be willing to accept it tonight. So we can get to work implementing some of its recommendations. Just as a bit of background for the new folks here, the Transportation Committee is relatively new on the scene. The Select Board created it in 2019. And our goal has been to work to improve sidewalks, paths, public transit options and services for everybody here in town. We do so following the town plan, regional plans, and collaborating with the Select Board, other committees, the Highway Department, Regional Planning Commission, V-Trans and the like. And I'll say sort of our bread and butter has been really working on developing grants, project designs, and working projects through the public engagement cycle. And I'll say in this first 4 years, we've been pretty successful. We've been able to secure a lot of grant funds and a lot of outside funding to get projects started. And that's really important because I think, as you know, transportation projects, be they just sidewalks or let alone roads, are not cheap. And if you want federal funding or state funding or regional funds, you have to follow a rather tightly choreographed cycle to get projects rolling, from planning to scoping and design to engineering before you could ever get to construction. And I think where the Transportation Commission or committee has come in, it's been in this spot somewhat between the Planning Commission and the Select Board, in that neither the Select Board and the Planning Commission has really had the bandwidth to add tracking grant opportunities and moving these projects through the cycle. And that's been where we've been doing much of our work. And we do so knowing, I mean, in big part, you know, a big goal is getting people out of their cars. Walking and biking is good for public health and safety. It's better for the environment. And certainly here in the village where parking can be at a premium at times, it's also good for business to get people moving outside of cars. And I'll say, so, and the development cycle really starts with identifying an important need or issue or problem. And the report we're bringing you today is an example of that sort of in action. We work as a group to assess the quality of sidewalks and pedestrian and how people walk and pedal through town. We used a tool developed by AARP and that's been applied in a number of other towns and cities across the country, some bigger than Richmond, some smaller. We did so with the help of 20 volunteers who all really contributed a lot of time and a lot of different perspectives to help us get a really good handle, we think, on what's walkable and what's safe, both in the village and outside of the village. And we also want to say that this project has been a snapshot in time. We started collecting data a year ago. And since then, we've been sort of organizing and crosswalking issues and problems, developing recommendations. And since then, some of the things that were high on the list have already been implemented. Major case example is the new sidewalks on Bridge Street. Really big thanks to Pete Goslin and the Highway Department for first reorganizing themselves in a way that they could work on this and putting in some really top-notch sidewalks. And we know that once V-Trans is done with the mess it's making on Route 2, it's going to start working there as well. The criteria we used for the project looked at street and sidewalk condition at the locations of crosswalks and signals and where they aren't, as well as road design, driver and pedestrian habits and behaviors, as well as road safety. And we focused on 3 areas, what we call the village, basically north of the bridge, the Round Church area, and Jonesville. And that's not to say that there are other parts of town that don't need attention. We certainly know they do, to help improve pedestrian, bicycle, driver access, road access. But these were the places we had the capacity to get started on. And I'll say the report goes into detail on for each of the neighborhoods we looked at and each of the issues and recommendations we've identified. For now, knowing you've got just a few other things on the agenda today, I'm going to sort of give a broad overview. I think in a number of cases, we found that crossings and intersections were confusing or unsafe. As an example, the crosswalk that leads from Bridge Street across to the Round Church, it walks you directly into a boulder and a sign. And if you turn around to go back the other way and leave the Round Church, you go right into someone's private driveway. It's not exactly what transportation planners recommend as ideal. But just, it's something I walk by or use daily. I didn't really notice it until, again, one of the great benefits of having multiple people on our committee really kind of called to attention a few things that we might have otherwise missed or that we just got used to every day. Again, overall, there's a lack of infrastructure in places, be they sidewalks or crosswalks, signage, buffers for pedestrians and cyclists. And I'll say, we recognize that making roads and sidewalks safer for pedestrians and for bicyclists is also going to make them safer for motorists as well. We don't, people that are driving worried about someone jumping out in front of them are going to be more stressed. They're, more prone to accidents as well. So this is going to be good for everyone that uses Richmond's roads. Sidewalks. Yes, we've got some great new sidewalks and some more planned. There are a bunch of others that still need some attention. In some cases, and we also, I think I really get excited about sort of vibrant sidewalks where there's people active and doing things there. But if you're somewhat less than mobile, sometimes things that sort of encroach on sidewalks can make it difficult for people to walk. One of our volunteers brought out a walker. John Hammerslaw, of course, he will swear to you he does not use one, but he borrowed one and used it to test out the sidewalk. And if you're not fully mobile, using a walker or just not being, fully mobile, these things can literally trip you up and might keep you from walking, and you might drive to places in town. So there are a number of spots as well as longer stretches of sidewalk that could use some additional attention. Sort of at a slightly bigger scale, I'll say there are a number of places in town where there are gaps in sidewalks or sidewalks end and leave pedestrians sort of right in traveled roadways. Again, in bigger scale, getting from one part of town to another where you're sort of crossing through neighborhoods, there's not necessarily great consistent connectivity at that scale. And then there are sort of motorists that driving too fast, running stop signs or ignoring crosswalks. Some of that is maybe could be improved with better signage. Some just maybe aren't noticed well, or it's just become standard that people drive a little too fast through some places. And we think there could be some recommendations to fix that. This intersection in particular is the intersection of Bridge Street, Huntington Road, Thompson Road, and Cochrane. Sort of has a poster child for all these problems. Cars go through there quickly, or it's extra wide. It's not really clear where people should stop. It's confusing for people that aren't used to, that don't normally drive through there. We got some funding previously to do a study of this. The best recommendation was way too expensive for what we thought the town was ready for. But we've gone back and we're working with the Regional Planning Commission on a new design. We hope in a few weeks to have a public meeting about it. And then hopefully soon after that, come to you with some recommendations and some options that are hopefully a little more affordable. Another sort of common problem, at least in the village, is sidewalks that have become parking areas. And certainly we recognize that no one wants to park their car in a place where it's going to get hit by another passing car. But if you're blocking sidewalks, it's really not, doesn't instill, that doesn't lead people to walk as often or as much. Again, the poster child for this spot is the sidewalk along Cumberland Farms. Melissa Woolabird took a bunch of fabulously awful photos of things going on there. And this isn't just odd hours, it's a regular thing where the sidewalk is the parking area. And maybe by poor design, but it pushes pedestrians out there, it pushes kids walking to and from school out into the road. And it happens day and night, which is all particularly dangerous and not what we want. And we certainly understand that Cumberland Farms would like to maximize its parking. We've got to work on a better balance there. Our town planner, Keith Oborn, is working on doing some research on a few more details there. And I think we're going to come back to you in the coming weeks or months once he's finished that work with maybe a better, deeper analysis of what's going on and maybe a few solutions as well. So the report includes sort of detailed recommendations, but short-term and long-term for each neighborhood and each issue. Again, I'm going to give sort of the broad overview here. In general, better signage and striping would help a great deal. Putting crossings in more safer locations would help. The one here is a mock-up of a design of what could be done on Cochrane Road. We got help from Du Bois and King from one of the grant projects we got grant funded to help slow down traffic there, traffic calming measures.
That's a speed table, is that?
That would be a speed table. Here, we could say, that would be a speed table with signage. It would connect trails, one coming up from the river, one coming down from the mountain there. It's a big, high traffic area. One speed table, one set of signage isn't going to solve everything on Cochrane Road. We're hoping to come back to you later with some more broader project ideas there. But Cochrane Road with its great demand for recreation and one of the few ways to cross town that way. There's a lot being asked of that road by people that are trying to pass through it, as well as the people that live there.
Is this the place where the bar that you witnessed people coming shooting down
Absolutely,
there?
that's exactly
And
where it
then
is.
right onto the road?
Yep.
That's one of them.
A
Yeah,
boulder might be good there.
yeah, or a jump.
Coming
or a
down
ramp.
that road.
There's two spots there where I've seen that happen. One a little closer to the village, but yeah, people coming out of there thinking they still own the trail and they're crossing the road. Again, crosswalks, improved crosswalks, improved signage would certainly help in a number of places. And again, the report goes sort of into detail there. Sort of the next steps, again, we're actively working on a number of projects now. As I said, the intersection at Bridge and Thompson and Huntington Road. We've got a grant proposal out for funding for the sidewalk on the east side of Bridge Street. We're doing some other additional work on Cochrane Road and Jericho Road and Main Street. And our committee's hope is to continue working with you and the other committees and the highway department and engaging the public to try and keep bringing you good projects and hopefully good opportunities for funding. But for now, we're hoping that the select board will accept the report. But also, if you've got questions about any of it, happy to talk to you more or see what else you'd like to have us do. I'll leave it at that.
I'll just make one comment. I think all of us received a email from people up on Valley View
Mhm.
saying, hey, extend the sidewalk. You should fund an extension of the sidewalk to us up here right away so we can get across down to the school. And one of the things that I started thinking of is the timeline. If you brought up that slide that shows where you start with the needs to the scoping, to the engineering, construction. That general timeline takes some number of years, doesn't it?
It does.
And if I recall correctly, grant funding tends to be available for new sidewalks, but not maintenance of existing sidewalks.
Yeah, traditionally, yes.
And so where I was going with that is my perception that historically the town has not generously funded either construction of new sidewalks nor maintenance of existing sidewalks, which I observe might help to contribute to the conditions that we see in front of us in this report today.
Well, traditionally, and there, that's been the case, and more recently, the select board has been putting some money into a sidewalk fund, which we've been able to leverage for other grant funds.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Valley View, the proposal to get a sidewalk from School Street to Southview and then on to Valley View, we got some funding for an initial study there. And then we're ready to come back to you with the next bit of design and construction.
Right, and we applied for a grant
We
to
did,
get us to Southview, but that's as far as the plan.
correct. So that was, Kathleen, jump in if I missed something here. When we took a close look at the engineering for that second segment, that we felt really good about the piece from School Street to Southview.
Mhm.
But looking closely at the second segment from Southview to Valley View, it didn't seem like it really fully appreciated the steep slope there. And that it would have come in at much higher cost. So our feeling was, based on the amount of money the grantors for this particular grant normally gives out, let's try and get the first part nailed down, go back and look more closely at, do we have solid engineering for the Southview to Valley View and work on that. So we're the first 1.5 steps in that cycle on the Valley to Valley View. But we want to come up with more solid engineering so the whole project wouldn't get tossed. And we hope to be back to you soon with that. Does that seem accurate, sufficiently accurate?
Okay, Jeff,
I really want to thank the Transportation Committee for doing some really stellar work, not just this plan, but the bike and pedestrian plan was really extraordinary, and being able to get all of these grants for these different projects, which, as Bard mentions, it really takes some lead time and some follow through in order to do that. And I think the Transportation Committee has done a great job of doing that. One of the things that I know really helps me is prioritization. Is we've got a lot of projects that are have been proposed. A recent one out from the village to Riverview Commons. It's really interesting proposal, but it's nascent. It's very early stages. And I know what I look to this committee to look at all of the different possibilities and prioritize and bring them to either ARPA or us or both or one or the other. So a big value to us is the work that you do to evaluate and prioritize and bring it to us. And then we can, and then we'll say no and or yes. But I want to thank you for the work that you've been doing. It's really been good.
Thank you. And I'll say, with all this, going through a number of these studies, particularly I think the folks on Cochrane Road may be getting a bit weary because we keep getting, funding for pieces of it.
Yeah.
And they're saying, you want us to come to another meeting to tell you again, we're still pissed off about this,
Right.
but we're trying to weave those together so we can come to you with a solid, comprehensive proposal.
And on that subject, real quick, people have been saying, where are these speed tables that were going to be installed? We had to wait for a CCRPC study to come back, and my understanding was we were expected to hear back from them kind of in the first half of June, which is kind of
I
gone.
think
What,
it's end of June.
end of June now?
I mean, I met with them right before Memorial Day for a walkthrough on things, so I do expect to report shortly.
Okay, so following up on that, this would be to install two temporary, rather movable speed tables that we could take out in the winter time to avoid them being destroyed by plows. Do we need, if we say these are working great, people are really noticing slower traffic speeds in this area, do we need to then do another study if we want to buy 10 more?
Well, actually, we just got funding for that study. So the temporary speed bumps will provide information now based on this summer. And this other study, so we're still in the phases, and we're doing a feasibility study for all of Cochrane Road, but we're doing a scoping study for the two ends, the eastern and western end
Right.
part of the study. So we'll be able to move maybe more quickly on those than the main part of the road, but the idea is to do the, like the building block. And
Mhm.
now, so Cochrane Road is definitely going to be going for that next step.
Just, I can't speak for the entire select board, but I think I can say for myself, I get a lot of emails from townspeople. Probably the one I get the most emails on is, for the love of God, what are we gonna do about highway speeds? And a lot of them are Cochrane Road. Some of them are Hinesburg Road lately too, but Cochrane Road is always just put in speed tables. And I keep having to tell people, I wish it was so easy.
Question, John, of the projects that have been completed recently by our highway department, do they meet your committee's expectations for performance?
Oh, yeah.
I thought so.
Performance and timeline. God, that was the sidewalks. I didn't think we were gonna happen
Good
for
to
up
have
to
an
5 years. But,
independent opinion of.
Pete's reorganizing the highway department really is been a great help. So yeah,
Sure.
very psyched about that. I stood out there a bunch, just taking photos of people walking up and down the street. It's
Mhm.
like to see it.
Saved us a ton of money too, right?
Absolutely.
Instead of
Doing all the
mowing the lawn, they're building structures that save us a ton of
Right.
money.
Yeah.
Doing things themselves and having to contract out to expensive contractors, it's just a godsend. David? Oh, you looked like, okay. Okay,
Just back to Jeff's point about the prioritization. We're a new committee, and for the first several years, we've really been covering a lot of different bases, and we recognize we need to have a priority list to bring to you. And so we've started to work on that. And resident, who had questions about that Southview
Mhm.
stretch of road said it'd be great if we had a plan, like a plan for sidewalks, much like highway has for road.
Mhm.
So every year we know, okay, these are what we're gonna be doing,
Mhm.
or whatever time. Yeah. So, we know we're all mature enough as a committee that we really come back with the more concrete prioritization.
Nice work.
Really helpful.
Denise?
It's also just been great to have Keith Oborn working with us
Yeah.
now, and having someone else to help give us some reality checks, and that we could, could keep pushing the bar higher for us too.
And to that point, when the transportation committee is on the select board agenda, if you knew what you were going to be talking about or which project you were going to be discussing, I think it would be really beneficial to townspeople.
Sure.
And then the second thing I just want to say is on all the major crosswalks on Bridge Street that you just have done. And I've asked before for this, but a little orange stick, and many towns have them. And they're removable in the winter, so they wouldn't be an
Once they go in
issue.
the middle of the road?
The middle of the road
Right.
to identify that it's a crosswalk, because people speed in front of on Bridge Street like crazy.
No,
And when the sun is bright, you can't see the lights. When the sun is bright, you can't see the lights until you see the people. If we could just have one of those orange fluorescent at every crosswalk that we have, just to especially identify out of towners, this is a crosswalk before they get on it.
I think that's a reasonable idea. Kara?
First of all, Transportation Committee, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you might be surprised to hear this from me, but I really do appreciate all the work you're doing because this is a safety thing and it's very needed in our community. For accessibility for all, so thank you. Couple questions that on your presentation. The intersection of Thompson, Cochran, Huntington, and Bridge Street, I do notice that I don't think there's a white line painted on the Cochran stop sign area. Is that something that you have the highway department that's going to be doing? Can we put that on the list?
There's a
Because-
bunch more work. I mean, yet to be done. I think so.
No, just
But
right at the
for
stop sign,
now.
right now, because you've got a lot of people speeding around in that intersection because they're skipping Route 2.
Mhm.
So if we can at least on Thompson Road have the line painted and on Cochran Road have that stop line painted so people know where they're supposed to stop.
Sure. Yeah, lines are easy. I mean, there's more work coming that would probably obviate the need for those, but that isn't here yet. So.
Yeah, follow-up action.
And then the next one is where you talk about that bike coming down the hill, Bard,
Off the hill on the
and
Concord
the
Road.
trail, have a stop sign for the trail. Like a little pedestrian stop sign, so that they're aware that they need to stop.
Right. Like you see on the snowmobile trails.
Right?
Right.
And can you possibly install that? Because that's, I have actually seen a bike come whizzing down that too, so. And that was the next thing. And the last thing was, you mentioned Jonesville, but I didn't see any Jonesville pictures. And in front of the businesses, the towing company and the mechanics, and then the post office and that affordable housing apartment complex. Have you guys looked at possibly any sidewalks in that area? Because I see jaywalk all the time. And no. You
I
don't.
do a jaywalk.
But there's a crossing, so technically, but I see a lot of people walking now in that area too, so I'm just wondering. Don't forget about Jonesville, please. Yeah.
Penny?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Agreed. Thank you, guys. That's just so awesome. Everything that you said, John, and your research and the photos and looking at the pedestrian and vehicular interactions, not only in the day, but also at night. As a village resident, I see a lot of everything that you're talking about. And I just want to say that I feel like in the time that I've been here, the sidewalks that have been prioritized, I think, are the ones that really needed it, which was basically from the school all the way down to the park, through the village and to the park, as well as those on East, let's see, is it on West Main Street? They were also done, I think, when we first moved to town. So it's really been good to see. I think I've seen the evolution of pedestrian safety being improved over the years, in the 23 years that I've lived in the village. And in terms of prioritizing, Jeff, I totally, it's hard to know, how do you prioritize? And because they're all worthy and needing attention. And, but I do think, where the most people are walking, what are the destinations, where are people coming from and going to the most often, from the parking lots to the park, to the school, and in the village. And that's been happening, which is great. Clearly more needs to happen. But I think it's been great so far. So I just wanted to give a big thumbs up, and it's really been nice to see it. Someone who lives right on Bridge Street and has endured construction on Bridge Street, I think consistently for the last 5 summers. It's really nice to not have a bulldozer cruising by. The other thing I wanted to just add was, I've been wondering, and maybe this has already been looked at, but by the cemetery, as you start out on Cochran Road, heading east, the cemetery on the right, just past that is the old road that's sort of in ferns. Has that been ever thought about as being used as as a potential pedestrian way, because that would just be perfect. It seems silly if that's owned by the town to not just mow it even, whether it doesn't even need to be paved, just it's there, it's a flat surface, it's an old road. It's a small section, but it's a section where cars like to go kind of fast, and there's a guardrail on the river side of the road there. So pedestrians who are running towards traffic there, or bikers who are coming back, have a hard time getting over any farther. And that could be a good little alternative. Some people, seems like that would be a really easy fix to just mow that section. So I would encourage people to consider that as a possible section of Cochrane Road that could be off the road, or a piece that could take walkers especially. Yeah, so that's a thought. And then the other thing the last thing I want to say is regarding signs. In the time that I've lived here, there are more signs than I've ever seen in my life. Signs have a purpose, but too many signs, you don't see any of them. And I just really, I don't know who makes that decision, but just putting up another sign isn't going to fix things. And it actually can deter from the effectiveness of a sign. And I just want to make sure that as that is a consideration for a particular place, think about all the other signage that is in that place that maybe needs to be considered before you just go ahead and put up another sign. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say tonight. I had one other thing about signs, which is a little bit unrelated, but just quickly, a lot of gutter washing, spray wash signs that go up every year. They're plastered all over our town. It seems like someone in our town could take those down. And I don't know who that is, and I'm happy to do it, but I also don't know if it's illegal for me to do that.
I know someone else that does it, and they're put up illegally. I think they can, it's nothing illegal about taking them down if they're in the wrong place.
I'm asking, thank you, John. Is that true for the select board? I'm asking the select board, I guess.
For the select board, no.
Yeah.
Should we offer a blessing to people?
I do should offer a bounty.
Some sort of-
Anyway, Kathleen,
Yeah,
That's
thanks,
all
Penny.
just-
Those are really great points. There is a old road, and I think when the law that
the ancient roads law.
roads, I
Yeah.
think that
Gave it
was
up.
removed from any
Yeah.
ownership or right away for the town. But it doesn't mean that it couldn't be evaluated in this project that we're doing this year.
Resurrected, if you will.
I mean, maybe it's not used as a road anymore, but if we own it, could people walk on it?
That's Kathleen's point, though. There is a history of the ancient or abandoned roads in the state, and effectively, a lot of the unused roads reverted to the landowners at that point in time.
Yeah, it's probably Barrett land that you're talking about there,
Oh, I see. Okay.
but closer to the road, the town still owns the right of way.
Controls it.
So the short version, it should fall into the project plan and the need and the initial scoping thing. So, and I know, if I recall correctly, there was an initial take on a recreational path that had what was the price?
$5 million?
$20 million for the full duration of Cochrane Road.
I don't think we put a.
I actually saw that in the CCRPC table.
Funny.
Yeah.
And we're also looking at the monorail, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. And a big thank you to Pete and his team, because it saved a ton of money. And he had a personal care in wanting to make it look good. And I felt that. And I think that adds a lot. That's really great.
Mhm. Thank you, Penny.
Okay, Lisa.
John, what do you guys see being next for your committee? You're going to continue with this, just keeping up with improvements as they occur, and
There's a few things. One, we do try and reach out to the public and get feedback and get some reality checks. But, in the nearer term, the Cochrane Road, Bridge Street, Huntington Road intersection, we hope to be coming back to you relatively soon with a proposal for that. We're the sidewalk on the east side of Bridge Street, we're working on soon. The Route 2 from the village to the park and ride to Riverview Commons, working on some options for that.
Yeah, I know Gary Bress
What
has
else
been
am I missing?
taking pictures.
Well, Cochran Road.
And more on Cochrane Road. And that's a bunch. And again, we know there are other parts of town that deserve some attention.
Sure.
We've been, we went from getting very little help years ago from the Regional Planning Commission transportation folks to this last few years, they're here all the time, or, on via Zoom, helping us with projects, and we're gonna keep pushing that. until
Include them
they
in your
get sick of
pictures.
us.
They might even give you more help.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
that,
really good.
I know that you select board members have heard directly, but the segment of Jericho Road between Southview and Valley View, we are looking at that again.
Yeah,
good.
Okay,
Well,
Here now.
nice job. Thank you very much.
This is great. Thank you very much.
So,
question for Josh. Do we need to vote to accept the report?
I think that's a good question for Kathleen and John. Do you need an official vote of acceptance?
Would be helpful.
Why not? Yeah.
Sure.
So
Okay.
move to accept the report as presented with the thanks of the select.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion from Bart Hill, seconded by Lisa Miller, to accept the Transportation Committee's walkability report with our thanks. Any discussion? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Thank you all for contributing, for coming, and thank you all for the work that we know you're going to be doing.
Thanks for the opportunity to do it. It's been really rewarding. Thank you.
Okay, so earlier tonight, we agreed to move a couple of things around on the agenda. And we would be going into appointing members to committees, but instead we're going to go down to item H, which is consideration of setting a living increase for the wage grid. Now, the way that the town of Richmond has done employee compensation, which some of you, of course, know far better than I do, is each year, each employee gets a step increase on their wage scale plus a cost of living increase. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay, and so we know that last year inflation was pretty steep, and at times we were looking at like an 8% CPI, but annualized over the year from May 22 to May 2023, the New England CPI increased by 2.4%. But that's an average. That's not.
But will it ever go back down?
Will ever go back to right. Now in our budget, our town budget, we budgeted for a 5% increase to the pay grade, just to have money in the budget. And then when the time came, we wouldn't be left holding the bag. We need to set tonight, because we're coming up on the start of the new fiscal year in just a couple of weeks, what the official increase will be. And this would be exclusive of the step. When we're saying increase by this much, we are not taking into account the step. The step is already there. So we budgeted for a 5% increase. The CPI for New England was 2.4%. We did reach out, Duncan did reach out to some surrounding towns. The information is in your packet. We only heard back from 5 towns, and they were not necessarily towns that we would consider peers, in the sense that the towns that we heard from for our compensation study were. For our compensation study, we didn't just say, go ahead.
These were towns that we reached out to as part of the comparable.
Okay,
group.
but we didn't get all of them.
We didn't get all of them.
Right, I guess I should have said.
Just want to make sure that they were part of our comparable.
They were part of our comparable. When we did the comparable group, just people often say, did you look at towns in Chittenden County? One of the towns that we did get numbers back from Winooski is, of course, in Chittenden County. But in the recommendation from the vendor that we went with had us looking to towns that were like Richmond, but not necessarily right here. So Duncan reached out to those same towns. He heard back from 5 of them, one of them being Winooski, the others being Stowe, Morristown, Montpelier, and Middlebury. Okay, sure. And Josh is bringing that up. So as you can see, this is broken down into municipal. Obviously, we got different values from different towns. We got a municipal staff number from each. Stowe and Middlebury gave us police and utility. Middlebury, Montpelier, Winooski gave us numbers for the non-union employees. So obviously, if we look simply at the municipal staff, all of these are greater than 2.4%. They're with the exception of Middlebury, which is 5, they're also all greater than 5. The last piece of information that I wish to share is that tonight at the Water and Sewer meeting, because the Water and Sewer Commission sets that rate as opposed to Select Board as a whole, we went with 6%. So with that information before you, the discussion, the floor is open. What we're essentially looking to do is we have a motion that's got a blank in it. I move to increase the pay grid by blank. And when we do that, we're saying increase the pay grid, not increase compensation by X%, because they're already getting a step increase. So we're basically saying, what should the pay grid increase be?
Just to explicate that a little bit, Jay, that the step level increase, if I recall correctly, is 2.25%.
Correct.
So the default is a base 2.25% increase, and it's similar to the Morristown notes there, where they talk about their step increase is close to 1.5, 1.7, and then the COLA is on top of that.
Right.
1.5. So that's the conversation we're having. On top of the 2.25% step level increase, what should the inflation increase that moves the grid?
Correct.
Is there a requirement this can only be done annually?
It's generally been our practice to do it annually.
Right.
The exception to that was when we did the big wage and compensation study a year or so ago, well, a year and a half now. That was done off cycle because we realized there was some immediacy to it. We were so far behind, Bard.
And also a recent police initiative.
That's
Right, right, you're right.
the
We
fact
did,
Of now, yeah.
right. And so
The
this,
reason I asked you, sorry,
ahead.
you know, if you look at cost of living over the last 2 years or so, it's been, you know, and is it going this way? Is it going this way? I hope not. Is it going this way? I don't know. But if we're trying to anticipate for the next year where that's going to end up, we'll probably be wrong. We might be wrong on the high side, might be wrong on the low side. It might serve us and the people being paid equally to go 6 months or something and then reevaluate. And if cost of living goes up beyond what we're thinking right now, well, those people benefit then the town.
right, that would be an option. You're right.
I'm not sure. I'm just throwing it out for
Right.
consideration.
If we miss the mark by a lot,
Yeah.
I think it'd be reasonable to come back. If we don't miss it by much, then we could just
Yeah.
defer it till the next time, Bard.
I would just put in the caveats, it would be hard to reduce wages. But
Yeah, let's take money back out of somebody's pocket. This,
Yeah.
yeah, you usually get your hand bit.
Jeff?
Well, essentially, that's what we did with the police, right? Is that we were in between cycles, but we upped the wage scale for the police.
Right, as a hiring tool or whatever.
And we budgeted 5%.
Mhm.
Okay, which is twice what the cost of living is now, right?
Was.
Right.
Was.
Yeah.
And we did that back in
So
January.
yeah, that was in the budget when we talked about it in the fall and voted on finalized in March. We used 5, and I think at the time it was actually a little bit higher than that, and we were trying
Yeah,
to
we
project.
came down to 5, I think.
Yeah, we were trying to figure out where would it be about this time, and then the 2.4 is based on the numbers from the Fed. They go from May of last year to May of this year, so the CPI has increased from May to May by 2.4% in the New England region, specific to New England.
And another comment I'll make, that this is similar to conversations we've had both in water, sewer and around police, is it's this combination of inflation and also sort of competition, keeping up with the Joneses. So that's where there's this, to the degree that we find it meaningful for information from other towns about what they've done. And it's probably not lost on us that employees are aware of what's going on in other towns, at least intermittently as well.
Basically,
For what
employees
that's
are,
worth.
somebody's employees are the people producing this data, so all employees know.
Yeah, and so our wages last year were benchmarked to the 70th percentile of the comparable towns.
Yeah.
So that's where we came up with our current grid, and part of the advice to Bard's point from the compensation study consultant was, look at CPI, but also get as much information as you can about what your comparable towns are doing so that you kind of keep pace with them.
Yeah, and it makes it defensible, more defensible.
Right. And we would have liked to get more data. This is what we got. But Duncan reached out twice at least,
I
right?
think you reached a couple of times.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is, a lot of towns are probably in the same position we are, where we'll figure it out at the end of
Bit of a
June, and
guessing
he's
game.
reaching out to them in May, and
Right.
so trying to get as much as we can, and hopefully it's helpful and not just more confusing.
I got
Yeah, Kara, go ahead.
Your 5% include your step and your COLA,
No,
so it's the 5% is strictly you put in the budget for the COLA.
correct.
Yeah, so it's, so the 5% is what we put in the budget for the wage grid to increase, but we also in that structure assumed every employee would go up a step.
Mhm.
So the budget is built on the whole grid going up 5% and everybody going up a step.
So the second question I have has to do with the percentages above other towns. You just had a 30 to 33% compensation increase to your staffers. So in the last 2 years, if you increase this to that level, you were potentially looking at a 40% increase in salaries to your staffers, and you don't have a lot of turnover in all of your positions. You strictly have a lot of turnover in your police department. All the rest of the positions, you haven't had a lot of turnover in the last few years, and I argued that you didn't need to do your upper level management, that you were, the inequity that you were having happen with just keep increasing the highest paid people by the same percentage as the lowest paid people, it meant that stayed happening like that. So my only point is I didn't get, I'm not getting at my job a 40% in pay increase in the last 2 years. That's a lot to tell the taxpayers. So I think it's really important that you realize that all these other towns might not have just given a 30 to 33% pay increase to all of their staffers. And so you're not gonna listen to me anyhow. I can tell by how Jay's body language is and his micro.
No,
So I'm good. I'm gonna stop talking.
I don't appreciate that, Kara. I was looking in Bard's direction because it looked like he was about to say something. Please don't project. If anybody else would like to speak, they're welcome to. Jeff?
So I don't recall when we did the compensation study that the end result was a 30% increase in wages. Certainly wasn't a 30% increase in our budget. I don't know where that is.
Do your math. Just look at Connie's numbers alone. She went from 60 something to 80 something.
Yeah, I don't think this was across the board, though. I mean, so I don't recall, I just don't know if I want to let that comment stand.
Someone 30%.
Perhaps, and I think that might not be terribly relevant to this conversation. I think that, so where I'm at right now is between 5 and 6. I feel a little uncomfortable about having town staff be different than the water sewer. And so I'd like to understand better what your thinking was on the water sewer board when you were thinking through the 6%.
You want to take that, David?
We anticipated 5%. We figured that it was close to 8%, but we figured it would be coming down.
Right.
We were right.
We were right.
The water sewer staff in particular had opportunities to leave and would have made more money and decided to stay. So we wanted to validate and recognize that and continue that. Because experience in water sewer has shown us that training a new staff is actually more expensive than maintaining staff.
Quick either.
And I think a second factor was the staff at the water and sewer department have saved us an immense amount of money with their timely actions to call our attention to things. And we want to make sure we keep employees with that level of dedication. As David said, Steve Cote said tonight, he has no interest in going anywhere else. He thinks he's fairly compensated. But if anybody ever did want to, everybody has their price, as the saying goes.
Josh, would it be fair to say around the water sewer staff, they're relatively new, and so they're relatively low in the pay grid as well?
Yeah, 2 of them are, yeah. Alan's been there for maybe close to 10 years.
Yeah, with that exception.
Yeah, and I think the other consideration was trying to also attract a water and sewer superintendent and making sure that we stayed competitive for that open position.
Because the background for some of this is you've seen some sort of jockeying among the towns.
Yeah,
like when
yeah,
people
it's
applied.
useful.
And there were, the stories where people were sort of interested and then they got much better offers somewhere else.
They dangle
Or
themselves.
like
Yeah.
significant.
Bruce?
Do we still do employee evaluations?
Yep.
And can people get raises through that? It's just really hard to swallow that people have got these raises just for showing up. Can we start going back to a regular 2% raise for everybody? And if you do a good job, we're gonna give you a little bit more. That's how it was in the old days.
That's how it was my whole career. I worked for industry
So-
and
It's right now,
I
it's
earned
just showing up, hits you this big raise.
Mhm.
And that's hard. That's hard for somebody where I'm from, what I did for a living.
Mhm.
And just showing up never got me any further.
showing up kept me from getting fired.
Yeah.
Then I maybe got a raise or a pay. Yeah, so, yeah. I agree.
And answer your question, Bruce, which is a good question. Within the last year, I can think of a situation where an employee's unbelievably good performance did result in a raise just for that employee in recognition of his effort and his work. That would be Steve in the water department. Because had it not been for him, we would be in a really bad place. So he got a bonus. He got an increase right then and there that the Water and Sewer Commission voted on. I don't know if there may have been others, or you want to comment on that, or?
I mean, I think there's been other promotions and things over the years based on performance and job positions that we can move into.
So I have a comment. I think that this question calls out the sort of whole structure of how we deal with step level and
Yes.
COLA, which is embedded in the personnel policies and our budget.
Right.
Which is probably beyond the scope of the decision that's presented here tonight, which doesn't mean it's an unsound or unreasonable question
Right.
about how we deal with performance and performance level relative to.
Or I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, our ultimate goal, I think, as an organization, anybody, any organization, should be to encourage people to do their best. And, if there is a golden ring out there or whatever that people can aspire to, it might be big, but not everybody's going to get it.
Right.
And if it is there and it really can be had, people will go for it and they'll try for it. And meanwhile, they do get paid because they've got to live, they've got to eat, got to drive, they've got to, do all those things. So, along with Bruce is saying, and I think we've all worked in private industry at some point, and you've seen it. But there is dog eat dog competition for employees, and there's dog eat dog competition among workers or employers. And it gives and it takes, and it gives and it takes. There are years, I got a job at Praxair in 2005. In 2008, the recession hit. They laid off 30% of their workforce. I wasn't one of them. I was a new hire. I sweated it. But fortunately, it had enough track record that they looked at my performance. They kept me. And I was grateful. They actually gave me a raise that year. So it does motivate people. And if we have a structure that brings that out in people, I think we're a lot better off. Whatever the percentages are kind of, they're just numbers.
I will say that even within state government, which is sometimes viewed as bureaucratic and like that.
No, I mean, you always had the opportunity in the private world. You didn't do it for. a bunch of
There
reasons.
are, and I benefited from myself from this more than once. There are things called meritorious increases where you
Right.
jump up a step level
Mhm.
for unusually good performance that somebody proceeds.
My
So
father was
even
civil
within
service,
those
same thing.
sort of traditional grids, there are ways of rewarding performance. So my real point is, I think that's worth exploring, but I don't think we'll resolve it tonight.
Yeah.
One other thing I think should be mentioned is, as part of this year's budget, we did decrease the percentage that the town pays for health insurance. So that the employees are now chipping in
10%.
10%. And so
Yeah.
I think should be taken into account somewhat too.
Mhm.
Jeff?
That's real.
So I really appreciated the compensation study process and the discussion we had. I thought that was, it took quite a while, as I understand it. It certainly started before I came on, and it's like, a year and a half or something like that of looking at comparables. And that's why we did the increase, was to be competitive with other towns to look for staff. And we took that and we chose to go to the 70th percentile, not the average, which was what the consultants were recommending. The whole point of that was for retention and recruitment.
Mhm.
And I think we did a good job of that. And I think that we continued that effort in our budget cycle when we acknowledged that inflation is going to be much more than it has been in the past. And we chose the number 5%. And we were, I think we were wise. So in our budget right now, we have a 5% increase. And if we stayed with 5%, we would not be going over this. Well, we would be within our budget. So I think, taking all that into consideration, I think that I'm comfortable with the 5%. And I don't think we need to game it personally. I don't think we need to game it too frequently. I think we made a good faith effort when we constructed the budget. We made a good faith effort with the compensation study. And I think personally, I feel comfortable with staying with 5%.
Would you like to go ahead and make a motion?
Sure. I move to increase the pay grid by 5%.
Bart, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff Ford, seconded by Bart Hill, to increase the pay grid by 5%. Is there any further discussion?
Only one qualification that is consistent with what we budgeted. It's not 5% more. It's consistent with what we budgeted.
Right. Lisa, you look thoughtful.
No, I'm trying to think about another question. I sort of do, but we'll revisit this again. I mean, economic picture will change, guaranteed. It might go up, might go down, so I think it'll go down both.
Karen?
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's the only reason I brought up my comments with the comparisons. My fear was that you were going to go over budget. So thank you for staying within your budget. I truly appreciate that.
Okay.
We're also taxpayers.
Yeah.
But
And we haven't seen our school tax figure.
No. Because the common level of appraisal is so different.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jane, aye. Thank you. Okay, again, we moved things around a little bit. I'm going down to item L. We have had a proposal regarding our Tesla. And the proposal comes from Bart Hill. So Bart, I would like you to talk to us about your proposal.
So I'm just gonna, I don't think I came up with this idea. I heard it and was like, hey, we haven't talked about Tesla for a while, so why not?
Yeah, thank you so much. I've been just dying to talk
It's
about
something
it.
to do with that right discussion.
It may be a bad idea, but it does have the feature of being an idea. And so I just posed it to a few people going, what do you think? Is this a bad idea, a good idea or not? And a couple of people said, I think it's a good idea. It's not without work. It contradicts the idea that we're going to sell it immediately. It addresses one of our other policy concerns, especially for people who don't have cars and the inaccessibility of the public transportation. We know transportation is an issue. We've kicked that around. So I am not wed to this idea. I'm not following my sword sort of on this idea. I just thought I'd raise it. Given our circumstance when we have vehicles not being used at the same time that we know we have citizens that cannot get from point A to point B. And putting those two things together, I don't know if it had any merit or not, but it was an idea.
But it doesn't have a cage.
Well, dude, that's an excellent point to raise, though,
That's
Jeff, because that would be one of the things is if we were to make it usable for akin to the SSTA vehicle, for example, we would have to remove some equipment. And at that point, we're just basically punting on it ever being a police car. So,
Which
Jeff.
might be a deal breaker.
Bart, can you explain more what it was that you were?
Yeah, I want you to explain what this proposal.
Oh, so thinking, well, we know we have transportation problems. People can't get. So, I'm sorry. So the way it's talks about it's introduced as discussion of using the Tesla for volunteer-driven intermittent public transportation to get volunteer drivers. That's a project because you have to screen people, schedule people. I know the United Way had a United We Ride application at one point, so they have a process for doing that. It really is a nascent idea. It's not like I have a proposal or a plan. It's more a concept. And does the concept have merit?
For who? For anybody in like free Uber? I'm not trying to be.
Yeah.
No, it's a
Are you
question.
gonna
Yeah.
compete with SSTA and all the other nonprofits that we donate to as a community? Are you creating a new service? Who can use this?
Well, so I don't know what you know about elderly and disabled transportation funding. which is inadequate. So we run out of those funds sometimes, and
Okay.
some people are not eligible for,
So you're thinking of a certain group of people.
it's a concept. I don't have a grid with financial eligibility. I'm just thinking there are people in our town who can't get where they want to go, who don't have money, who are low income. I don't want to turn it into like, I don't want to become SSBA. It was just the idea that if you have people who need rides and you have a vehicle that's not being used, is there a way to put those together in any way that's credible and manageable?
Thank you for
Okay, Jeff,
Not a lot of detail.
Well, we actually have 6 vehicles that are being used. And so I'm not sure the Tesla is the optimum for this idea. I think it's a creative idea. I think it's, it's interesting, creative
It's an
idea.
idea.
There is and I just heard on the radio today, there's some place down in southeast Vermont that's doing some kind of rideshare thing. Which I think is something that really should be explored. However, that all of our police cars are fully equipped to be police cars. I do think they need to be used, and it would make more sense to me is if we had somebody use them who is a police officer. I
agree.
I would prefer.
Maybe this is a backdoor way to get some police.
Maybe, I mean, the Tesla is a high performance car. It's 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. You might not want to volunteer,
I'll do it.
anybody. Yeah. David needs another car.
By the way, speaking of fleet owners.
Yeah, really.
How many cars sitting?
I mean, I would love to see, as part of our Hinesburg contract, for example, to have them use our cars. Just to, to keep the brakes from freezing up and maybe have, maybe get them. The Richmond police put on it so that people would know that they were our cars. And that we're moving around town. I think that would serve a lot of purposes. And
This could be enough of a conversation. It really was just like, a couple of people said, oh yeah, that's worth talking about. And so
I think it's interesting.
And so
I think I agree with the idea. I mean, we don't know exactly where it's going or if, but it won't if we say no. So
Josh,
just to build on Jeff's point, I was actually talking with Chief Cambridge just yesterday. He brought up that point that he's like, hey, we could drive your cars at times. And the officer he brought with him, which I think was Officer Thomas, was really interested in driving the Tesla. He really wanted to drive.
I told you some
people like it. So, so I'm gonna follow with VLCT to find out, what legalities do we need to do to let another municipal employee drive our cars, but if it's possible, it sounded like they were really interested in helping us out for all the reasons you mentioned.
I think it might be, I think the idea worth exploring is whether or not we should use a town-owned vehicle, maybe a dedicated vehicle for doing transportation, for low income or people who can't, like, what do you do with a wheelchair in that thing? That kind of stuff.
strap it to the roof.
Yeah, great.
So, and that topic has come up before, and I will say also, what is it, GMPA, SSPA are kind of stressed.
Yeah.
GMPA is low riderships. They've extended their fare-free thing, but you'll recall that the current chief executive said, we're going to hit a budget problem in January.
Yeah,
So,
January, I think, yeah.
yeah, like part of the undercurrent of that is we probably should not expect more from the publicly funded transportation agencies, maybe less.
Yeah.
So what can we do to fill in any of those gaps?
yeah, doing something like this
Okay.
could be just a little bit of a nudge to someone else too.
Right.
Maybe part of our budget process.
Right. So we don't have an action item on this. I'm going to take one more comment from over on Kara, and then I think we can move on to the next one.
That's a good idea.
I think you're gonna find that.
Oh, and Penny after her.
Non-police, people who are not police officers and the volunteers could not drive a police car because we not interpreting, impersonating a police officer. So you can't have cars.
You'd have to strip it.
Right, you have that whole issue going there,
Fortunately for us.
but you could. But we could sell some cruisers and use those funds to purchase a van to transport people.
Right.
You couldn't do that because you can't use police cars
Or creative ideas.
Right. Although we did get, the reports, we did get the reports of the study on would microtransit work here, and even if the vehicles are already in our ownership, it's very expensive.
Right.
Penny?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Appreciate the creative ideas, but I'm just gonna say I'm a little offended by the slapsticky talk about the police cars. That is no small problem. I think it's a problem that the select board needs to address and do something about. It is absolutely, the select board approved the purchase of all of those, not necessarily you guys, but at some point the select board approved the purchase by the police department to buy those. And it's a lot of money sitting there. It feels, I go over there every day and look at them, and it's really feels very, very excessive and wasteful. And I appreciate creative ideas, but I don't think it's something that's a laughing matter. There's a lot of people in town that are very upset about that. And so I just want to remind you guys to be careful about having a good laugh about the police cars that are all lined up over there, because it's a lot of people are really upset about it.
Can I speak to that for a second?
I want to.
All right,
Okay.
Penny, sorry,
Go on the line.
it's sort of like, I wouldn't call it gallows humor, but we have been burdened with this problem for a long time. Sometimes
I
we just
understand.
laugh or cry. So, that's our reaction. And
No,
agree with you.
I understand. I understand.
I agree with you. I don't like to see them sitting there either. It represents a failure for us to have a police force, and that's a big problem. It's something we have been beating ourselves up to try to solve, and it's not easy to solve. We have.
I'm
proof of
sure
that.
there's no easy solution, but I think
Well,
for people to feel that you guys are taking it seriously would feel really good.
We're not. We're taking it seriously. We're not laughing at it. I mean, we
And
have
Matt, sharing that message with the people of the town would be great.
So we do have our on the agenda, but I know member of the select board did want to reply. David, do you want to reply?
I just wanted to point out that this board suspended the purchase of new cruisers. And all of those cruisers were purchased when we had a fully active police force and needed them.
and we're trying to get one back.
And it hurts to see 6 cruisers parked idle in the parking lot every day, day after day.
If we sell them and we do have a police force soon, we're going to need to buy a new car back at more than what those are worth. So we're going to spend a lot more money.
There's a limited window when we can do that.
Also true, right?
I understand all of that, and I think you guys are doing a
I'm not going
good
to
job. I just want to say thank you, but also consider that as your.
Okay. I think it's time that we just move on to the next item. Unless Bart, if you'd
I
like.
just have a comment, Penny, as somebody who's probably spent 80 or 100 hours on police issues in the last year, I'll just say, I don't think you fully appreciate the amount of time and effort that we have spent on police chief, police officers, the budget, the vehicles. And so to say that we should take this seriously is somewhat daunting as somebody who spent 80 to 100 hours on exactly this issue over the last year.
Okay. So on that sub note, I value everybody's opinion, and I would not want to be in a town where people couldn't share theirs. But that said, we have other items on the agenda. The next item on the agenda before we resume our originally listed agenda is item number M, which is the question of what town-owned equipment would we be potentially looking to sell or replace or traded in rather. We have a quick update on that from Josh.
So I've had time to dig into it in a lot of detail, but knowing that we did discontinue mowing services from the town, asked Pete about what he had that he was looking to trade in or sell, and he said that he's got only piece of mowing equipment he wants to get rid of as of now is the Hustler 0-turn mower. He wants to keep the Kubota tractor as they do use it for spring cleanup and doubles as a backup for sidewalk maintenance. They also have one extra weed whacker they'd like to get rid of also. His thought on this equipment was to trade all equipment in except for the Kubota tractor towards a new subcompact tractor with plow and sander to replace the Ventrac, which is the machine that they use to plow the sidewalk. So he's got an idea of equipment and plans for it in the future.
Okay, and then to add one more thing to that, The town does, as of the last year or so, own the fry wagon, as we call it, from the July 4th committee. It has been basically deeded to the town. The town has accepted it, but we have no interest in owning it. We have cleaned it extensively, pressure washed it. The tires on it are completely shot. We have at least one person who would like to buy it, but we have to go out for public bid. The committee is going to be putting together the information that Duncan would need to list it. We've got photos, we've got the manuals. We just need to type basically the information up. And then we would put it out for bid and see what bids we get. There's no town policy that says exactly where or how many places we have to list it, but we have considered that certainly Front Porch Forum, probably 7 days classifieds. I think people read those more than Burlington Free Press. Probably Craigslist, and probably also Facebook Marketplace. And then just arbitrarily say, keep the bids open for 3 weeks, publish that we will open bids on such and so date, and see what we get. We have an offer for $2,500, but that's just an offer. There's no guarantee that we wouldn't get much higher bids or lower bids, but that's what the bid process is for. You don't just give the first person who comes along, a deal.
Are we setting a minimum for ourselves?
We would have to just agree on what the floor would be, because you don't want somebody bidding $5 and winning them the fry wagon.
Maybe what?
If you start buying
You want
fry
the fry
wagon in
wagon
addition
too?
to cars, where is it going to stop?
My God, anything with wheels on it.
Have, towing.
Yeah, no.
Okay,
So
go ahead, Jeff.
So Jay, maybe for a future agenda item, I think that the idea of inventorying our equipment by department is not a bad idea.
I
think that's
agree.
a good idea. I remember, I think Bob Stafford suggested that we do that for the police department. This is kind of after the fact now. But going forward, I think, it's a good policy thing to do for department heads to, have an inventory of what they have. What their replacement value is. We have it to a certain degree for big items in our capital plan. But, maybe for smaller items as well.
Right, you're absolutely right, and I'll add to that. One of the reasons we are in such a bind, although we're digging our way out of it, I'm in the water and sewer department, is because the idea of what we actually had in inventory was just a fiction. We were told, oh, we've got that. When we went to the shelf to get those parts, there were no parts, or there were empty boxes. And that's one thing that they are trying to resolve over there, because in any business I would run, I wouldn't want to be able to go to a spreadsheet and say I have 17 stems and 16 widgets. And another thing we have to keep into account, for example, we found this out about water meters. A water meter basically has a 20-year lifespan from the day it's manufactured. If it sits on the shelf for 10 years, when you install it, it's got a 10-year remaining lifespan. That's just how it works. So you've got to include your depreciation schedule and your replacement schedule. You can't just put things on the shelf and say they're good until we use them. But this is all stuff that really we do need to gather. As Josh has said, there's been a lot of irons in the fire over the last couple of weeks. But we're not saying this is it. We do need to build on this.
And I think we actually have a start to that list. We went out to rebid for insurance. We did have to create some of these lists, so we've got a start to a list as at least we can build from.
Right. And it's just good fiscal management to say, let's avoid buying 700 things that we replace 5 of every year. And on the other hand, buy piecemeal things that if we did a volume purchase, we'd save a lot of money on. I mean, it's just common sense.
And you might want to set a floor, I mean, I don't know if it matters how many rakes we have, but, something that costs several $100s, it starts to, that's what we've done with the capital plan. Is, it's kind of set a floor of what we need to plan for in the future, and I think it's helpful for evaluating our department heads as well.
Okay, Kara.
Thank you. I really appreciate this being an agenda item. And just a question, with Pete's tractor that he had, that he's going to keep to trade in toward a tractor to replace the other tractor that we have, we wouldn't trade in the one that he's replacing? I was a little confused with that. And
So I
just wanna make
think-
sure understood it.
I think that he has a 0-turn mower that he wants to trade in to go towards this tractor.
And the
And he would
tractor-
probably trade in the tractor as well, and then just have 2 pieces to go towards that.
Not 2 tractors.
I don't think that's the plan, no.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, no,
I didn't
fair-
hear
good,
what you
fair
were
enough.
saying
Yep.
Correctly. And
Sure.
the other thing was, The other question when I asked you to put this on the agenda, to start looking at this and start thinking about things that work in a capital plan. I know that police cruisers are in a capital plan. And I know we haven't had a full police force for prior to COVID. And we still bought a new police cruiser last year, right before the chief resigned.
No,
Or the year before
we
last.
canceled it.
But
We
that-
did buy a new cruiser.
It was.
It was a couple of years,
last-
21,
Last year.
FY 21, except for FY 22, right? We skipped FY 22.
Right.
We skipped FY 23. I think we purchased one in
23
20.
skipped it.
I think we did purchase one in 22 though.
You just bought one, even when you didn't have a full police department. So I'm just asking you to relook at, I know you're working on a new police chief, Bart, please, thank you for all the time you put into this. I know you guys are desperate to get police officers. I know it's a problem. You can't just snap one up and have them come. You're not going to get a full six cruiser police department in the next couple of years. These assets are depreciating, and that's why Penny got upset. I know you want Hinesburg to use the cars. They're not going to use all 6 cars. So please put it on your agenda item to look at selling some of the cruisers, please.
Speaking only as myself, I do think that's something to be explored. When we discussed the Tesla, there were 2 votes for, 2 votes against selling it, and then either one person was missing or they abstained. I was one of the votes for selling the Tesla. And now that we are tossing around ideas such as stripping it of its police equipment and just using it as a car, I'm like, again, it would seem to me to make sense to sell it.
Let's bring it up.
Yeah, and the same thing for, I agree with what's been said. We have 5 other cars sitting out there. We're not buying any more for the time being, but we do need to make sure the ones we've got are getting, driven around some. And I don't really know that maybe there is some benefit to selling 1 or 2, but I don't want to sell a lot because, I know how the world works. As soon as we sell one, we're going to suddenly be besieged by police applications. But I think it's a discussion worth having. Okay, we are now jumping on the agenda back up. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, hi, Bruce, sorry.
I just had a quick question on, if a product that you guys have, like, let's say a fire hose goes beyond its life,
Mhm.
what are we doing with those? Are we finding places to recycle those? Are we throwing those away? And I'm just using the fire hose as an example. We have things that go out of life and they may not be junk, they're just not good for being a fire hose anymore. Do we have a program to make those not go in trash?
We give them away to friends, what do we do with things like
I
that?
just don't know the answer to everyone. I mean, I think it's a piece by piece
Sarah should be answering these questions.
basis. I don't know. I'd have to.
Okay.
find out.
Okay, so moving back up on our agenda to item D, this is something that we can probably go through relatively quickly, is consideration of appointing members to town committees.
You're not answering my question.
We don't know the answer. We said that.
Okay, I didn't know that's what you said.
Yeah, it varies on the equipment.
Okay.
That could be another future discussion item.
Yeah.
Because I think it reverts to department heads. I don't know.
Right.
what happens.
Yeah, but beyond that, we don't know. So that's why we don't have specifics.
We should talk about the people.
So that would
Yeah.
be part of the inventory and
Right.
how do you dispose? of it?
Okay,
Hmm.
so consideration of appointing members to town committees, commissions, and delegate positions. We normally do this in late May, but we had a few positions that were either left empty by lack of candidates or there have been further developments. One being the Chittenden Solid Waste District Delegate. The town is entitled to a delegate and an alternate delegate. The 4 meetings, I believe, once a month on the 4th Wednesdays. Our previous delegate, Logan Haig, did not wish to continue. Andrew French had, after some begging on my part, agreed to apply. And so there's no one running against him, as it were. So we have Andrew French for CSW delegate.
I move to appoint Andrew French to a 2-year term as a Chittenden Solid Waste District Board Delegate from Richmond.
This is Bart, I second that with thanks to Logan for his.
Yeah.
service.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
we have a motion from Jeff Ford, seconded by Bard, to appoint Andrew French to a 2-year term as the Chittenden Solid Waste District Board Delegate from Richmond. And our thanks to Logan Haig for his service. Is there any further discussion?
I have one comment to think about. So we've switched to Casella. as our drop-off center. Is there any plan to like evaluate how that's gone and, or reevaluate? What's the difference between Casella and Chittenden Solid Waste?
The reuse center
It's a 5-year contract.
And I might.
and a quarter
Is it
cheaper
5 years?
trash.
Yeah, I forget how long it is. It's
Okay.
though.
Well, it'll come up and.
Yep.
Whatever it's been, take away.
Okay, so any further discussion? Seeing none, please, the motion is to appoint Andrew French. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Art, I.
And Jay, aye. Next, we have the Water and Sewer Commission. Annually, we appoint these for July to June terms. So this would be for terms starting July 1, basically.
Yeah, there it's essentially dry one.
Right.
So of the ones that are appointed, it's a 1-year term.
Right. Well, yeah,
All appointed.
they're all appointed.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, 3 are respectful members and 2 are.
Two have to be customers. And so Morgan Wallover and Aaron Farr are currently serving. They were both interested in continuing to serve. And moreover, we think we're gonna be able to stick them with chair and vice chair, but we have to appoint them first.
And then.
Wow.
And then we also have to fill 3 select board spots on the committee. Bard, David, and I are the current members. I've not heard from any of the 3 of us saying they don't want to continue, but I mentioned earlier in the year, Lisa or Jeff, should you be insane enough to want to do that, I would certainly be happy to step aside. Is there any interest on either of your part on being on the Water and Sewer Commission?
I had to leave the planning commission, although I will tomorrow night, maybe legally. So, which I didn't realize I was breaking the law, but we don't have a police department, so I'm fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I always say that, but
So I'm happy to stay, but if you would be interested in being on the Water and Sewer Commission, I would be happy to step aside.
it would be less of a burden now than it would have been like a month ago.
Okay.
I'm sure it'd still be a burden, but
Well, I'm happy to keep doing it. I don't want to make you do something you're not comfortable with. So it's up to you. You have to make the call.
who would not renew? in my
That would be
place?
me.
That'd be you. I'll leave it up to you then.
I'm happy to keep doing it then. Because there's really nothing more exciting.
There would be a coming up to speed curve.
Well, I would encourage any member of the select board who, if you were to say, I don't feel like doing it now, but I'm going to make an effort to attend.
Yeah.
And then in 3 months, say, I feel good now. There's no rule that says we can't do a midterm replacement.
You're more than welcome to come and attend. We can probably sneak you into one of the seats.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, the reason I suggested this with your
Yeah.
technical background would,
Yeah, and it is something that I think I might be able to actually contribute to instead of just going,
okay, well, start coming to meetings. It's, just come an hour early and we've been meeting at 5 o'clock, but that's because we've had so much. We're
PM.
trying to creep it back to 6 o'clock. So, anyhow, so
Yeah, let's.
we've got a couple of motions. Yeah.
And with my part, I really appreciate your guys, all of your willingness to serve on this committee.
Well, thank you.
We're very
Okay.
busy at the moment.
Okay, so we have 2 motions. Let's start with the first one for the customer seats. Would anybody like to make that motion?
Jay, this is David. I move to appoint Morgan Willowbeer and Aaron Farr to 1-year terms on the Water and Sewer Commission to fill seats reserved for customers of the system.
Bart, I will second that.
We have a motion from David Sanders, seconded by Bart Hill, to appoint Morgan Wallover and Aaron Farr to 1-year terms on the Water and Sewer Commission to fill seats reserved for customers.
I also want to thank Morgan and Aaron for initially stepping up and also continuing to serve. Their contributions are very welcome.
Right, I would agree with that. They have both been far more than just simply bodies and seats. They've both taken a great deal of effort to inform themselves and to make good contributions. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, next we have, and none of us should probably make the motions. That leaves you two.
I move to appoint Bard Hill, Jay Furr, and David Sander to 1-year terms on the Water Sewer Commission to fill seats reserved for select board members.
I've not had the power like this for a long time. I second.
Okay, now unfortunately, we have to vote on this
cannot abstain.
because we otherwise have no quorum. So we have a motion from Jeff Ford, seconded by Lisa Miller, to appoint David, Bart, and I to fill select board seats on the Water and Sewer Commission. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, we have a little bit more. Matt Buckley has applied to be on the Parking Advisory Committee. We had at least one seat, we had one seat open, right?
At least one seat, let me see.
Well, he has agreed to be on the committee. We have no one else who's wanting to be there. So do I have a motion to appoint?
It is just one seat, yes. This is one seat. This is one person for one open seat, yes.
So I move to appoint Matt Buckley to a 3-year term on the Parking Advisory Committee.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff Ford, second from Lisa Miller to appoint Matt Buckley to a 3-year term on the Parking Advisory Committee.
I would point out that one of the advantages of having Matt on this committee is he lives on Dugway Road, very close to the river. And so he's experienced many of the issues around parking. So
Yeah.
Most of them have, and they've been.
Yeah, and
really
Chuck's on
helpful.
Dugway Road too, right?
Yeah, John Cohn and Diane, Mariana.
Yeah, I know where they live, and Chuck Gilroy lives on
Gilroy
Dugway
also,
Road.
yeah.
Yeah.
They see the problems, they see them daily, and they've come up with solutions that we wouldn't, because
Mhm.
they're there, and, you know. They see them working or not working also, so they can evolve.
Okay,
with the
so
committee.
I apologize. Who made the motion?
I think I made the motion.
Okay, motion from Jeff Ford, second from
second.
Lisa Miller to appoint Matt Buckley. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye?
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, I.
And J.I. Our next one is the Planning Commission. Allison Anand has applied to be appointed back to it. I believe it was an oversight on her part. She let her term lapse, but did not mean to, and sent us a letter saying, help, I want you back on there, which we're glad to do. She's been valuable over the years. So we have a motion in the memo to appoint her to a 4-year term on the Planning Commission. We don't have anybody else who wants it. And right now we have only 6 people on it out of 9, so we can definitely use her.
This is Bart, I move to appoint Allison Anand to a 4-year term on the planning commission.
This is David, I'll second.
We have a motion from Bard, second from David to appoint Allison Anand to a 4-year term on the Planning Commission. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye?
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, I.
J.I. Now, on that subject of the Planning Commission, until a moment ago, they only had 6 out of 9 seats filled. Now they have 7, but they have requested that we shrink the commission to 7 so they do not fail for lack of a quorum, which I know over the last year has happened 3 or 4 times.
There's one vacant seat that just hasn't been filled.
Right.
And I'm not there either now, so there are only 7 people that could attend.
This is Bart, I move to approve reducing the size of the planning commission from 9 to 7 members.
Okay, this is David, I'll second.
We have a motion from Bart Hill, second from David Sander to move to approve reducing the size of the Planning Commission to 7 members. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye?
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, I.
And J.I. Okay, thank you. And thank you to all of the aforementioned for your willingness to serve on town committees and representing the town. It takes a village, as the cliche goes. Okay, our next item has to do with the Gillett Pond Dam project. As was mentioned at our last select board meeting, the Richmond Land Trust has already received $150,000 for the Conservation Reserve Fund for the project. And came back for 50,000 more, but it had to go through the Conservation Commission first. They have voted to recommend that. And so it comes now before us to actually authorize that. And did you wish to speak to that?
I'm just here to answer questions. Lou sent you a big packet, the packet that the Conservation Committee got. So I can answer questions, or if you want me to give you any kind of reasoning for why we needed to request this.
And I apologize, sir. I should have asked your name because I don't know you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's Fritz Martin. I'm
Okay.
from the Richmond Land Trust, and I'm the chair of the Gillett Pond Fundraising Committee.
Okay, thank you, Fritz. Glad to have you. Questions
I
for
want to
Fritz?
thank you guys before anybody else interrupts, but I want to thank you guys for what you've done up there at Gillette Pond. I mean, what it was, what it's just about to be is quite different.
Yeah.
Much better.
It's going to be something.
Yeah. Gorgeous. And I do have one comment before you even launch into your thing. Parking is going to be really inadequate, I think, unless you do something.
They do have plans for, what is it, former spaces?
We have a six car lot.
Yeah.
That's been part of the plan all along. We're kind of restricted in that area.
And
But there's also active discussions with the parking committee and the police with roadside parking there. And I think there's good opportunity for roadside. The road is wide
on the
enough.
outside of the curve. basically.
For sight lines, I think they're talking about the outside of the curve right now.
Yeah. That, yeah, 200% support for that, seriously, because
Yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah.
gonna need probably.
I love hearing
50 cars.
support.
Well,
Yeah,
you know,
what you're doing is good.
I go down
It's
there
gonna
often
draw
enough.
people, that's the thing.
Considering how terrible it looks now and the design that you have, I mean, that's a prime recreational asset to the town of Richmond. And it would be a shame if something were not done. So we're grateful for your work.
Yeah.
So are there any questions from the public? Okay. Are we ready for a motion?
I move to approve the use of $50,000 from the Conservation Reserve Fund for the Gillett Dam project being managed by the Richmond Land Trust.
Ms. Bard, I'll second that.
We have a motion from Jeff Ford, seconded by Bart Hill, to approve the use of $50,000 from the Conservation Reserve Fund for the Gillett Dam project being managed by the Richmond Land Trust.
Do we need to mention the expenditure deadline? It must be expended within 3 years of the date of final approval.
I don't think that's going to be an issue because you're doing it this
Under
summer.
construction now.
gonna-
man.
We're signing the contract tomorrow.
Okay, that should take care of it.
Okay, good question.
Yeah, it was an issue up until now,
Okay, if it's not, then we're good.
but thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Thank you, sir.
And can I thank the board and a lot of people here for the support? The funds we got from the congressional discretionary, the community discretionary spending. $250,000. A lot of it was because we had community support, both from community funds and from our conservation fund. So that was key to us getting here. It was a real good partnership. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so
Can I ask you one question before you,
Sure.
well, okay, sort of off the record, well, not off the record, but
Well, I have to ask Jason. Are you related to Pat Fur at all?
Me?
Yeah.
to the best of my knowledge, there was an original fur who came to USA in 1742.
Yeah.
So we're all related. somehow.
Okay, sorry, Lisa.
that's all right. We're, the Girl Scout camp, are they working with you for parking or not, or any?
No, I don't think there's anything they could do that would help. I don't think they have any land.
Just
It's,
because of the location, or?
yeah, it's a steep driveway up to their camp and it's all kind of
Okay.
steep over there.
I know for a while there's some interest, and I wasn't sure where it had gone, but anyway, so. Okay, thank you.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is a request from the Altogether Now group for $2,500 from the community wellbeing line in the budget for their project. There's information about the project in the packet. Josh, could you kind of summarize what they're looking to use it for?
Actually, I'll turn it over to Stephanie.
Oh, Stephanie, you are there. I'm sorry. Stephanie, please tell us all about it.
Oh, okay. This is, there's that community well-being line in the fund. And so we're coming back. We are stipending youth interns to work on mental health and well-being with kids in youth ages 12 to 18 in the 5-town area. Most of the kids have been from Richmond or Bolton. And we're talking to all the select boards, and so far they've built a website, which is up and running now. They've connected with resources. They've gotten, they did a survey, which I think we sent you all the results of. So we've been updating you along the way. This is the request to use $2,500 to pay the kind of second round of youth interns. This will get us through the summer interns as well that are going to start putting on the events. And we had our meeting with MMUUSD yesterday. So we have a draft MOU, and we now have someone from the Bolton Select Board who's coming to our advisory meetings as well. We've presented all 5 select boards. So things are moving along really nicely, and we hope to get more grant funding or new grant funding soon. And we do have a grant funded program manager right now through June 30th through United Way that you're helping be the fiscal agent for. I'm not sure what questions you have.
The questions relating to use of the $2,500 to pay for an intern for Altogether Now. Anybody? Jeff?
So where would this money come from? Is we appropriate, they're part of the appropriation for our budget, right?
It's in the budget.
It's
Yeah.
in the budget. So we already have approved this. So we're just how we're
allocating.
doing it, right? Okay.
Okay, anybody want to make a motion?
Is Bart, I move to approve the use of $2,500, sorry, from the community well-being line in the budget in the FY 23 town budget for the All Together Now project.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Bart Hill, seconded by Lisa Miller. Move to approve the use of $2,500 from the community well-being line in the 2023-2024 budget for the All Together Now project.
So I'm confused now. The 2023 budget is the one that we're in.
No, it's in the current year's budget that'll end June 30th. Yeah.
Stated. Okay, correction, 2022-2023 budget.
It's we call it the FY 23.
The FY 23 budget.
Yeah.
Okay,
And have we already expended the other $2,500 in this line item?
okay, thank you for the clarification and for correcting my misstatement. Any further discussion? Could you please state your name and your vote?
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I. Bart, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, we are on the home stretch.
Thank you.
Strange that may seem. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, our next item is kind of an interesting one. It is consideration of a request by the post office to fly the POW flag. So we've already taken care of the wage grade increase, so we're now down to item I. A little bit of background for people listening at home about flying flags on the town flagpole. We are currently flying the Black Lives Matter flag and of course the American flag. And we have had questions from time to time saying, why can't we fly my group's flag? And the answer to that legally is that we aren't legally required to give everybody access to the flag, because the Black Lives Matter flag is speech not by the general public, but speech by the select board. So that's, we're not, I know that may sound specious. Why are we endorsing one point of view or another? But that's the legal justification for how we can fly one flag without having to fly all flags. Now, the post office has asked, well, let's back up a little bit. In the memo, it mentions that the Defense Authorization Act, Public Law 105/85, Section 1082, requires that postal facilities display the POW MIA flag on 6 specified days each year: Armed Forces Day, Memorial Day, Flag Day, Independence Day, National POW MIA Recognition Day, and Veterans Day. And so they are essentially looking to comply with those guidelines. However, there is not a flagpole on the post office as such. It's the town flagpole. And so as it's property of the town and not property of the post office, we don't have a legal obligation to fly it. We do fly the US flag and the Vermont flag, and we fly the Black Lives Matter flag from June 19th to September 19th. So as Josh put in the memo, there's not a ton of room left. Another option that Josh mentioned was, could we allow the flag to be flown in one of the flag holders that's on the overhang in front of the entrance to the town center post office? Okay, so that's basically the background. Now, to finish the discussion up, and then I'll pass it to Josh as he may want to add something. If we want to consider flying the flag on the dates requested, there's not a motion in the memo, because he would recommend that we get legal advice before taking that action. But is there discussion? How do people feel about this?
I think it's important to remind people there are still prisoners of war out there.
Yeah.
Some of them, it just remains, they haven't been found, but some of them are, a few are still alive, I think. So, yeah, they did their part. So, Mr. West.
I would recommend we pursue legal advice to allow it.
Okay, and do we want
With the
to
intent of allowing it.
now do we want to request in terms of the town flagpole or one of the overhanging flagpoles here outside the post office, or does it matter?
I think an overhang.
I think it's gonna be, the advice on that is, I think essentially how you can do it without opening either location up to anybody who wants to display a flag. So I'll ask them for both locations, but I think the advice would be the same
So
because it's town-owned display.
my recollection is one of the reasons for that we're flying the Black Lives Matter flag at Volunteers Green was this concern about space on the flagpole. So we have never flown this before?
I don't know.
It seems to me, I remember seeing it, but
Well, Josh, is on the-
I don't, not before my time.
it's the flag's been around since the late eighties, I believe. And
it's a
it seems
Vietnam War
quite
thing,
possible, yeah, it seems quite possible that there have been periods where it was flown, but
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it because based on our recent conversations about the Black Lives Matter flag, there's a specific process to follow. And if you want to get advice, but the other thought is because it's a federal bill, well, it's a federal agency, the post office, maybe there's an exception. I don't know, but we can find out if you guys are interested.
yeah,
Right.
I support getting legal advice on what's the best.
Yeah, I mean, if we were trying to put 3 flags on the pole, it starts getting like a pecking order. It's not what it's about. So
I mean,
it shouldn't be about that.
the one thing is it's only what, like a dozen days a year. So it's,
Yeah.
it's not every day. Cause that was my first thought too. Oh my God, it's gonna look like a ship's mast. But if we continue, if it's only a few days a year, we
Right.
can do it without opening it up. You might want to consider it.
yeah, and it conflicts with 2 Black Lives Matter days and only 2. The dates in May, November, and September don't conflict with the Juneteenth, with the Black Lives Matter flag. But regardless, I don't think I'm not hearing anything on the select board saying, no, we don't want to fly the flag. We just want to make sure we dot our i's legally.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, and that next one is also fairly quick. It relates to the 4th of July. As anybody who has a pulse and lives in Richmond knows, we hold a parade on the 4th of July that starts at Lemeroy Court behind Harrington's, goes along Main Street to the intersection of Bridge and Jericho, goes along Bridge Street, across the bridge, and ends at Brown Church. And so we also have a fun run that starts at the school, at the elementary school, at the middle school, that goes down Jericho Road, down Bridge Street to Volunteers Green. And so we need to legally take action to close those roads for a period of time on July 4th. However, we also have in the memo in regards to Esplanade Street. The residents of Esplanade Street have been, as the memo mentions, informally closing the street. And we don't know of any legal authorization they have to do that. It's just they don't want people parking on their front lawns and so forth. Now, what about further on down past the houses? The motor vehicle ordinance prohibits parking within 250 feet of the wastewater treatment facility, which basically takes in the entire area that people had been parking in the past. So legally, they can't park on people's lawns and they can't park down by the sewage treatment plant. So legally, they really shouldn't be parking there anyway. But we've never officially apparently taken the step to legally close that road to all but resident parking. And so there's a lengthy memo in here, but before we even get to the memo, that people understand, we're basically proposing to close Bridge, Jericho, East and West Main. Actually, the motion here says from 10:15 a.m. to 10:45 p.m.
Oh, geez. Well, that was a mistake. Because I think what you wanted was from the school down to the traffic light from 10:15 to
Right, for the fun run. And the others,
AM. And then you wanted the rest of it closed from 10:15 to noon for the parade.
right. And then Esplanade Street pretty much, was that gonna be 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.?
Yeah, that should have been PM.
The PM, okay.
That should
So
start.
that's, I was wondering about.
No, that meant, yeah, I got like AMs and PMs. Oh, these are for us.
So I move to close the following roads for the following times on July 4th, 2023. Jericho Road from the traffic light to School Street from 10:15 a.m. to 10:45 a.m. East and West Main Street in the immediate vicinity of the intersection with Bridge Street from 10:15 a.m. to noon. Bridge Street from the intersection with East and West Main Street, Volunteers Green from 10:15 to noon. And Esplanade Street from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.
with the exception of vehicles belonging to residents on the street and the water and wastewater staff.
This is David, I'll second.
Yeah, we have a motion from Jeff Ford to do a whole bunch of closing, seconded by David Sander. I'd like to comment about the second bullet. It says East and West Main Street in the immediate vicinity of the intersection with Bridge Street.
Yes. Go ahead, yeah, go ahead.
When in fact we need it closed all the way down to Limerick Court.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So could we have a friendly amendment to
Yes.
say East Main Street to Limerick Court,
Yes.
And West Main Street is to.
West Main Street to basically just right there at Cumberland Farms.
Oh.
The parade
That's
doesn't
true.
go
Yeah,
down.
right, there's no need to go past.
So I think immediate vicinity, West Main, that works fine, but East Main Street, I would ask that we amend that to say East Main Street from the intersection with Bridge Street to Limerick Court.
Okay, I'll accept that amendment.
Yep.
Okay.
I missed that your email.
It's a lot of closing. Any other comment?
The one other comment that I'll make is that you stated that anybody with a pulse would know that we have a 4th of July parade. I'm not sure having a pulse is mandatory. Imagine a cemetery that's.
Well, we do run it right by the cemetery. You're absolutely right.
This is like, they're groundswell.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Okay, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, I.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay. We have 2 more items on the warrant agenda. The next one is an update on the police chief hiring process, which I will pass over to Josh.
So I think the last update, we talked about reaching out to the candidate who declined to move forward with the second stage of the process. Reach out to him after some conversations. He considered it, but still declined to move on to the next stage of the process. The next conversation with the hiring committee was to move to the candidates we offered interviews to for a first round, and they declined. So I've reached out to both of those candidates. As of now, I've had conversations with both of them. They're both, I think, interested in considering it. They wanted some time to talk with their families to see if it was the right call for them. I should know more by the end of this week or early next week if either or both of them would want to move forward with the first interview.
Question on that. How far away are they currently living? I mean, roughly.
Yeah, one is an in-state candidate and one is one state over. So fairly close and familiar with New England.
So, my question is when do we start to revisit this process altogether? Marching down the list of 20 candidates, they were not our top candidates and we have changed since we began this process. We changed the wage scale, which could make a difference. So, at what point will and who makes the decision on reconsidering opening up the process again?
Yeah, the conversation with the hiring committee was that this was sort of our option, I guess, C or D, whatever, however you're counting it. So reach out to the folks that we offered interviews to, but they declined. It's my opinion, if we fail at this, then I think we might have to go back to the drawing board, because then we get to candidates that we didn't even want to offer first interviews to. And then I think that's where I would see if we go at that point.
I think that's a fair description, because these were candidates who were selected for interviews. It's not like we're going back and
19 and 20.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Right.
So these were seen by the hiring committee as credible candidates and they withdrew, right? So-
Well, yeah, it was true before we could offer them an interview.
And so now it's, if they were in there, they've made the sort of first cut, and the question is, are they still interested and viable or not? And it's only as one member of the select board and hiring committee, it would be my view, if neither one of these works out, either interview or beyond, then we're back to ground zero. This phase of that recruitment process will.
We go back to square one and not ground zero.
Yeah,
True, that's where they
Fair
set things
one.
off.
the starting line.
I don't want to be at ground zero.
You don't want to be a blob, radioactive blob.
Well, no, I didn't say that.
Okay.
Well, one thing that I would suggest that maybe the hiring committee to consider, and maybe you, Josh, to consider is something we have not discussed is how the process goes from one step to the other. And, you know, and I, for one, would like to be a part of that process in some fashion, you know, so. You know, I was upset that the way I learned about, you know, our first candidate was on Front Porch Forum. And it does seem to me that there is a role for the elected officials to perhaps have an interview, perhaps have an introduction before the public does, you know. My understanding is part of the process is for the candidate to, you know, talk to our first responders. You know, we are the elected officials. We represent the public, and it would, and I, you know, I recognize that there's a select board member on the hiring committee, but that's 1 out of 5. And it would seem like it would make sense to me for us to just know what's going on, because I have to tell you, it's embarrassing and uncomfortable
When
when you
you
ask
know-
questions when you don't know
Right.
what's
Right,
going
I
on.
don't like to claim ignorance, and I've had to.
So about the composition of the hiring committee, originally the reason that it was, well, we had 2 select board members when June was on the select board. And the decision was made when June rotated off the select board that rather than removing her was just to let her continue being on there. Now, this is not my decision to make because ultimately it's the town manager's, you know, hiring decision. But I personally would have no problem with having an additional member of the select board, such as yourself, being on there. I have enough fish to fry, and I think you have an interest in this. So if we do start over, I mean, that would be a suggestion.
I think we arguably could do both, right? We could have 2 select boards and keep June and, or 2 select board members and keep June. And then we could have similar to what you're really seeming to propose. If we have a meeting with the first responders, arguably you could have a meeting with the first responders and the select board, or the select board separately from the first responders.
Frankly, I think it would probably be more productive, a little noisy and complicated, but if everybody knows everybody else's opinion all at the same time, that affects the outcome.
You know,
I think, I mean, maybe positively, I think.
I think it would be better to keep it, personally, I think it would be better to keep it closer. I see those as different meetings and people with different agendas, you know, so.
Yeah, I have no complaint with that. If that's how we go, that's fine.
One other, I don't know if you want dialogue outside the box, but I think there's another issue that isn't being addressed by the current process that apparently is out there that's affecting the casting call, essentially. It's, you know, the police community is probably the most tightly networked group out there. Something happens here. They know about it in Orange County, probably a minute from now or 10 minutes from now, and vice versa. I'm surprised at how well connected they all are, but on the other hand, that's what they do for a living, and, you know, they can't shut it off. So anything that goes wrong here, or anywhere for that matter, is known everywhere pretty quickly. And any of the candidates that are worth their salt are plugged into that network. So they know too. And I think, and I don't want to offend anyone, but I'm going to just say what I got to say. I think there's a management issue in Richmond that has pervaded the departures. And I'm not blaming anyone. I think it's the ultimate management of this town is us, the select board. I think that's something that we should look at and question, and maybe we come out the other side of that doing things the way we have. Okay. But I think we need to question it and really dig into it and see if there is a better way or a different way that might be helpful. And it might uncouple us from that news cycle that's out there that we've had chief 1, chief 2, chief 3. And so, and officers leave, and they're probably all saying about the same thing. I don't know. We don't get the benefit of that dialogue, but
I think it would
or
be,
maybe we do. But
well, Lisa, to add to what you're saying, as you mostly probably all know, I posted one of my long rambling diatribes to
Yeah, I read it.
Forum the other day.
Yeah.
Trying to keep it informational and non-argumentative, and I so far, I think the feedback
I
I've
think you
got.
did a good job. Yeah, there's a lot. I learned some things from there. I didn't know.
And so to your point, I think this is an issue in which more disclosure about the history might be helpful. There's a narrative that we go through, chief, like pick your metaphor, pick your simile.
Well, you guys, especially Bard, has,
Right.
and David too, have enlightened me
Right.
on some of the things I didn't know.
and it might be, I've been contemplating whether it would be worthwhile to kill my limitless free time even more by coming in and looking through our personnel records since, let's say, arbitrarily 2000,
Mhm.
and say, here are the people we've had working for us and here are their tenures, because we make reference all the time to, here's an example, back when we had Paco as our director of police services. Well, I was traveling 40 hours or 40 weeks a year. I barely knew who Paco was. I wasn't paying a lot of attention. I was paying more attention to whether United had canceled my flights. So that's an example where there are probably other people out there going, who is this Paco guy? What happened to Chief Cock? Where did he go? Didn't we have some guy named Muldoon? What happened with him?
Mhm.
If you've been on the select board since, 7 BC, like, I don't know. I don't know how long.
Last decade.
Last decade. We know this stuff, but the townspeople don't.
Mhm.
And I think it would be useful if we actually were to sit down and say, okay, pick a day, year 2000. Here are the chiefs we've had during that interval. I don't know that we need to go to the trouble of listing the individual officers each year, but we could say this year we had 3 officers, this year we had 4, this year we had 3. Because I don't want to get into the messiness of, well, I heard the reason that guy left was because we don't need to go there. But I think I think it'd be worth mentioning, have been our staffing levels.
Mhm.
And here are the people who we had as chiefs, and here's when they left, and here's why. The last 3 chiefs we've had, Acting Chief Herrick, Chief Kapitansky,
Mhm.
and Chief Muldoon. I'm not forgetting anybody in there, right? Muldoon,
Mhm.
I don't think anybody had an issue with his performance. We liked him, he was good, but his partner moved to the Pacific Northwest and he chose to go with his partner.
Mhm.
We then did a job search. It was happening essentially during COVID and shortly after George Floyd's death. And as I mentioned in my post at Pro Church Forum, that was not the time that you're going to get your best pool of candidates. We wound up with Kyle as chief almost because he was really, if you looked at the 3 finalists, he was the only one who was acceptable. I'm saying nothing bad about Kyle, but it was Kyle or nobody. Kyle then decided to take a job for more money. He's entitled to do that, that left us with the decision to, why didn't we just immediately open for another job? That was when Hinesburg was talking to us about having a joint district. We formed a committee to explore having a joint district. We had all 10 of us in the room, 5 from Hinesburg, 5 from Richmond in a room, and we all agreed this would be a good idea. We formed a committee made up of people from the 2, and then almost within a week, we got notification from Hinesburg that they were pulling out of it and wanted to go back and have their own study for where they wanted their policing to go. And that's why we don't have a joint operation right now. And we maybe wouldn't have had it right away, but we at least had agreed to discuss it. And then they said, nope, we don't want to. The thing that grates my gears is that the Hinesburg select board chair told VT Digger that we were the reason that she pulled out, which there's no truth to whatsoever, but if that's how they want to narrate it. When that happened, that's when we said, okay, I guess we've got to just start thinking about advertising. And that's the search that we're actually in right now. Chief Herrick was our acting chief because he was of the officers we had, he was
Senior.
Yeah. So would we like to have filled the position and known what Hinesburg was going to, would we like to have done that Hinesburg was going to do what they did sooner? Sure, because then we could have had a search sooner. But I don't think it's so much of a failed process as Chief Muldoon having every right to go elsewhere, Chief Kapitansky wanting to go elsewhere for money, and then us hitting the absolute worst time to recruit police officers since World War II.
Timing is everything, yeah.
But on the other hand, let's think about the positive things. We have raised the base wage, and then we raised it even more to match what Williston has. This is a town that has a lot of desirable things about it. We just need to get the messaging out there and make people know that, the $4 an hour more was not in place when we started this process. So,
and we have cruisers.
And we certainly have cruisers. And one last thing, and then I'll shut up for a minute. We often see people posting in Front Porch Forum. We need to stop and ask, what kind of police department do we want? And I appreciate that there's some people who have that point of view. In my posting in Front Porch Forum, I mentioned that the things we've heard consistently for decades have been, we want community policing. We want a police department that values diversity, equity, and inclusion, and understands fair and impartial policing, and agrees, not grudgingly, but open-heartedly agrees to practice fair and impartial policing. And then the last criterion that we had in the current search that I recall is we wanted somebody who was prepared to come in here and engage in strategic planning, to do that discussion, to work from a background of having done that. And so that's what we're currently looking for, essentially, is somebody who meets those criteria. Now, if somebody in the town says there's something else we need that you didn't mention, I would be all ears, because I want the best police department that the town of Richmond can have. And I don't think it's a trivial matter to say, you know, we want to hear, is there something we could be doing better? But to take it back to where I started, I know that because I've listened to these guys and I've been present for some of it. The average townsperson in Richmond does not know that. And so I think it would be a good idea to kind of give a history of where the Richmond Police Department has been in the last 20 years, staffing levels, who our chiefs have been, that kind of thing, so that people know and are not just acting on what the person at the corner store told them.
Yes, PR is everything in this. It's a PR game, and I don't think we've.
An open and an informed decision-making process. I mean, there's a reason that we have the Sunshine Law. I don't like to do anything where people think we've got a hidden agenda.
Right. Okay. That
I was just gonna add two things. First, you know, 20 or 30 years ago, people routinely said the Richmond Police Department is a training ground for other departments. That's the deal. You only have a handful of officer positions. People get to a certain level if they were ambitious and wanted to move up to either specialize in an area or move up into a supervisory role like sergeant, etc. You have to move up, you have to move out. And so there was a resignation for that, about that. And so in the intervening years, the more of the last 10 years, we've tried to make an effort to not be just to that. And yet, if you look at why individual officers have left and where they ended up, it was often into a specialized position in another department or moving into a department because of pay or wages, like you move to Burlington and better pay and wages. A different lifestyle as a cop, I think, in Burlington these days than it is in Richmond. But that
we do better on that scale, I think. But still,
I would agree.
that's where
My
people
opinion.
went for the wages and benefits. And sometimes for the opportunity to move up a much larger pyramid or wage scale. And then there were the examples of family dynamics where, you know, they're moving because the spouse is moving or they're moving.
those are always a wild card, and you know,
And those things happen. And so I think it's reasonable for people to ask, like, why do people keep leaving? And there are these stories, but I recognize we have this like recent large number, but it's been going on for decades. There has been a cycle of officers for decades. And then in terms of the chiefs, there were specific incidents or issues around each chief departure, and we just went through some of them. And it's sort of like the perfect storm that they all hit at the same time. In terms of what we do, we were very upfront about hiring for a chief, that we're looking for somebody who can do a strategic planning exercise. We had overt conversations about a chief executive of that department being a chief, literally, leading that with expertise about policing, about strategic planning, and also as a partner in the conversation with Hinesburg about a potential municipal district and work together about a possible future, which is another reason why some people, if they wanted to come here for 10 or 20 years and be guaranteed, and we were up front, like on our radar is a conversation about joining with another town. Not everybody's in for that, right? And also, if you want to be a chief, how many officers do you want? This is a modestly sized department. Some of the more ambitious folks might be looking for larger
Yeah,
departments.
if they want that
So-
resume builder kind of thing.
We're hitting sort of like this certain niche, and I think it is sort of the perfect storm, and it helps to describe why we started to engage in the conversations with Hinesburg.
Mhm.
When I started on this board 10 or 12 years ago, it was apparent to me how many chiefs do we need in Chittenden County?
Yeah, right.
Here,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, it's daunting, the governance of, just answering the phone, of response and dispatch, that has foundered on the shoals. It is over 30 years that people in Chittenden County have been talking about shared dispatch. It has yet to be achieved, partly around issues of shared governance and financing. Then also people raise the question of why don't we just contract with Hinesburg or contract with the state police? It seems clear the state police are not interested in providing contracted services. to
What I
individual
understand, we'd have to dissolve our police department to even.
They just refuse to do it.
Yeah, okay.
The
Wow.
state police will not be taking on any more
Right,
towns.
it-
They just,
It's not even.
They got their own staff problem.
I think if we had to have that and we got it, we'd be sorry anyway. So.
Well,
It's
we're
moot.
not gonna
We're not
get
gonna
it.
get
It's a moot kind of question. They're not offering. And if we ask, they say no. So, and then Hinesburg, the long-term relationship is a partnership.
Mhm.
The overt conversation we had is if you contract with Hinesburg
Mhm.
and eliminate your police department, you are also subject to the vagaries of Hinesburg. Like, how much do you pay for your contract?
Mhm. Mhm. True.
How much service do you get for your pay? If the
There's
contract,
always
then
that
they now have
customer
a monopoly.
Right.
Nobody
suspicion,
else
yeah.
wants to do it.
and if
Which
we were,
is why we turn to municipal joint district of shared governance and.
Which has its own
shared
set of
ownership.
questions.
Right.
here, so.
and if we contract, we lose personnel control over, for example, if the chief of Hinesburg
Mhm.
or any officer in Hinesburg, they would not be subject to Josh's supervisory authority. If we thought they were doing a very poor job, we would have to basically say, Hinesburg, pretty please fire your police chief. And that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's why we thought that a union district where it's jointly funded and jointly managed with both sides having contributions and oversight was the way to go. And if the town of Hinesburg Select Board would like to reopen that discussion, we would be right there with them.
Okay, now these are all things that I'm sure the public doesn't know, and they probably aren't gonna, their eyes will glaze over somewhere in the middle of it, but. I think these are things that need to be injected into the narrative that's floating around out there.
And I
because
think some
I don't
posts
think-
summarizing some of
To
this.
me, this is hopeful.
Yeah.
It's got potential. It's exciting. There's there's somebody's out there who would be interested in each of those kinds of things, but they're not hearing it. So
Right.
that's going to stimulate some applications, I think, just to get that word out there. The second thing is, what was I going to say? We should probably just go ahead and have a consultant do a strategic plan for us. So we have something that tells us what it ought to look like when we do hire one, when we do hire a chief. I don't know.
But
if
that's one of the candidate criteria for the chief is
I
that the
know.
chief would be part of the strategic plan. I think it'd be a poor idea to do a strategic plan and have a chief come in and say, oh, you've done it for me. I mean, huh?
We don't have to tell them.
Well, that's also true. Or, yeah, we have this thing.
I want a strategic plan that's informed by our own chief, not by an else. We can pay all the consultants in the world. And what they'll basically probably do is take the study that they do for every other department, erase the name,
Charges.
that- put our name in and charge us. I'm not interested in that. I want one that we are part of, that the chief is part of.
Have we ever had one?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do we refer to it? I mean, has
Yes.
it stood the test of time? I mean, I don't know.
Have we discussed it here since you've been on the select board? No.
Okay.
Have we discussed it since I've been on the select board? No. So
Okay.
this is a step we could take, is we could look at the last strategic
Well,
plan.
maybe, okay, if we do have one, maybe we should all be I'm not informed. I'm not aware of it. I'm not.
I think it's something we should try to,
Okay. I mean, if it's this
When did
thick,
we-
it's gonna be.
Larry produced them.
we'll do.
Whoops.
I would say in any event, I think the world has changed in the last 5 years,
Also true.
more or less. So I think my personal perspective, when I thought about this and talked a little bit about this with other folks, is to hire somebody who comes in and is then willing to engage with stakeholders, citizens. What do we want our police force to look like? What services? Conversation I had with a chief from another town is, well, you're gonna want 24/7 coverage and it means this many officers, and it's,
Not
well,
necessarily.
you know,
This town goes to bed at
We're proving that right now that that's not necessary.
we haven't even gotten, like,
Yeah.
that's an assumption that doesn't make sense.
Right.
24/7 coverage is not something we've ever had.
Getting what, 16 hours a day, 14? something
And
like
so
that.
then it's like, you get into a question of what should shift coverage look like based on what criteria, but also what services do you want? So some of the services, like here, if I recall correctly, Richmond Rescue does, car seat installation. But that's a kind of thing that people want. They're like, is my child car seat installed correctly? Some huge percentage are not.
That's correct.
And somebody needs to understand, it's like 40 hours of training to understand how to install all these different.
No wonder they're
child
so wrong.
seat. Well, right,
Yeah, scary.
and community policing, I can't tell you how many chiefs I've had this conversation, Volunteer Green on a typical evening in nice weather is filled with people. Literally at times hundreds of kids and voters. They just will walk around.
Right.
Has anybody seen a chief of police from Richmond walking around Volunteer Green?
Not many Hinesburg guys have done it.
But that's the kind of,
Yeah.
thing,
That-
so.
That would mean a lot to people who aren't all that well.
Well,
informed
right.
Otherwise, that's.
And
that's a
walking
big
up
thing.
down Bridge Street, like, and urban police officers discovered like neighborhood policing.
Yeah.
That's one of the things you wanted to do. I
Mhm.
think they discovered this in like the 70s,
Mhm.
that you took off your sunglasses and you walked around and you talked to people.
And they talk back. That's
Right.
even more valuable.
Because you've got to get rid of that us versus them attitude.
Exactly. And behind the sunglasses, the
Right.
aviator things, yeah.
So those are
Okay.
just some random thoughts, but
Yeah.
at least what we've said to date, this is predicated on getting a new executive, a new chief in to help both rebuild this and engage in the strategic planning and support our conversations with Hinesburg. If we can't, at some point, if we cannot secure a chief, what do we do?
Mhm.
Do we go to a plan B? Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, partnering with Hinesburg does to me seem like a really smart idea. It's not a merger, it's a share of services. I mean, I'm thinking of lots of businesses that do that. And they have separate identities and they manage to share things.
Mhm.
It's a synergy that they develop that way.
Right.
And if we can get that kind of future, essentially description out there in circulation in the police community, I think we'll see some people come out of the woodwork that might not have come out otherwise. We might get some better
This
candidates.
term of regionalization has been kicking around in policing for, I don't
I
know,
don't know.
some number of years.
There are some states, Pennsylvania does a good bit with it.
Mm.
And everyone in Vermont, police executives that seem to universally agree it needs to happen, but
Yeah.
essentially it has yet to happen.
Well,
We did it with school district.
yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's like kicking and screaming in some cases, obviously.
So,
Okay,
Could I say a couple of things?
sure.
I would point out that this is the longest conversation we've had about this topic without a specific issue.
Mhm.
And I applaud that,
Yeah.
and I think,
Right.
and I would also point out that we allocated 5 minutes at the end of our agenda to do this. I think your idea, Jay, of looking back at our history is useful.
Mhm.
And we also have to look at our future. Just because we know what we have done relative to this and what we discussed, the public does not.
Right.
And it's useful to have this conversation about where we're going, so they hear it from us. And also they have an opportunity to tell us what they think, even if we've already heard it.
Right.
And even if we already think it's useful to build
Mhm.
support.
Right.
As far as the study goes, I think the timeline on the study is different. For Hinesburg. I think what Hinesburg did is they went out for an RFP. They had a lot of them and they spent a lot of money on this study. They spent $75,000 on this study. And that was before we met, that they were going through this process. Hinesburg has its own issues. They have, they do their budget in a completely different way. And they had a failed police budget and it caused a great deal of consternation over in Hinesburg. It's a whole different issue. It's their town and that's what they've got. We got mixed up in this after that happened. And some of that residual angst from the Hinesburg Police Department was a part of the miscommunication about when the study was, what we were going to do together and how it was going to interact together. All of that's water over the dam. The study is almost complete. And it's
been started but not complete. Yeah,
I think it's coming. I think it's almost complete now. And I would suggest that instead of us hiring a consultant to take Hinesburg's, plan, change the name and give it to us and charge us $75,000, that we should read theirs, and see what it has to say and see what they have to say as far as what its relevance is to our situation. So I would suggest this would be a good additional future agenda item. I would suggest it would be useful to have it earlier in the agenda when we might still have people.
Right, we have one hand waiting to speak.
Yeah.
I want to say one other thing before I call on Penny, and thank you, Jeff. I do appreciate that. One of the reasons that I haven't posted more of my JGrams, I don't know what else to call them, is because I'm aware of my own bias, and I don't, and I feel awkward saying here is the facts, when in fact they may not be the facts because of bias. I'm aware that I am biased, but I may not be aware.
Everybody's biased.
I'm not aware that in what way I'm biased. And I'd rather, and I'm very sheepish about putting something out there and then having 10 different people say, actually, you're wrong there. Because I'd rather say nothing than to misinform people. But I think that's something that perhaps if maybe that's something we could do as a select board, is to pull together a draft of here is the recent history of Richmond policing and make it the speech of the select board, not a JGram.
Yeah, but there's a saying about biases, not do you have biases? Yes. What are you doing about them?
Right.
That's really the question. So, and that. I think if we can take it to a select board agreement and we issue something, including Josh in this, it's the management team is issuing this on behalf of Richmond. This is what we're doing. This is what we want to achieve. This is how we're going at it. Comments are welcome. And including Hinesburg in there, I think will excite some people.
Right.
That wouldn't otherwise be excited. Yeah, that's good. I haven't seen us do this yet. I
do think we can do more, and that includes the projector just shut down. I think that includes discussing, the police cars more, because I tend to lean on the side of, well, yes, I know that if we sell them and then we hire a bunch of officers, it's not as easy as saying I want a car, because there is that window. But I don't know that we need to have that many sitting out there. And I think that's something that we should be responsive to. If we feel a need that we need to keep all of them, I think we owe the townspeople a discussion of exactly why, and not just saying, well, we're just playing it safe.
Why don't we put two of these two related topics at the beginning of our next meeting, which is
doing it
ours
publicly, I
and
think is going to provoke some
the
feedback.
whole police thing. So subtopics are vehicles, chief, officers, Hinesburg. There's at least 4.
Yeah.
That would be useful. And the one other thing that I'd like to point out is that, I don't know if it's an agenda item or not, but the planning director gave us a report of all of the things that he's been doing over he's only been here for a month, right? A month and a half that he's been here. It's fantastic. He's working his tail off. And it's a very clear report of all of the things that he's done. I think that would be really good to know about the police department.
I think it'd be good to know about all of our departments, really.
But particularly police, because and even now, so we have one officer who's 20 hours a week. It would be interesting to know what he's doing relative, or what we're doing relative to CJC. I have to say I was really disappointed in the report from the Howard Center
at our last meeting.
Yeah.
It took a half an hour and we learned nothing about what they're doing.
Well, that's absolutely true. That was one of the worst presentations I've
That
seen.
was just terrible. And yet, regardless, I would like to know what they're doing in Richmond, you
Right.
know, and so things like that. The data stuff that you're working on, Jay, I think is useful. It's probably somewhat moot considering we have different, no matter what, we're gonna
No,
have
you're
different
right.
personnel. But establishing what data we want to get and how it's presented to the public I think is relevant, you know.
I actually think that's part of a strategic plan outcome.
Mhm.
Because what do we want and how do we know if we're getting it?
Right.
Yeah.
Which is at least partly.
How do we
data.
measure it? Sure.
Right.
What do we do if we don't get it? Yeah.
But
And
I
all of
think,
that too is I call it PR, because I don't know what else to call it, but that's PR for us, that we know what we're doing and we're heading somewhere, that we can make sure it gets out there. And that's what's
Right.
gonna really do.
I
some
think
good.
we need to do
People would
more
know
to
we
be,
did
to give context to, what's been going on the last 20 years. And I think we need to do more than just assume that because we discussed at a meeting why we should keep cars. We can't assume that the public is sitting. I mean, we don't have 3,300 people sitting watching this right now.
Right, right.
But we can do better
Mhm.
and we need to do better.
Yeah, well, okay, I think we are all arriving at the same
Yeah.
place from
So-
different directions.
Penny, we've kept you waiting for quite some time. I apologize. You're welcome to go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. I just wanted to say that I'm really pleased to hear everything I just heard, because I think that it's not that the select board has been doing a bad job. I just think in the time that I've lived in town, that the link between what all the town departments do and the select board and what the community knows about where our money is going has just been really just vague, I guess. It's not that it's secretive. Nobody's been keeping it a secret, but I don't think the communication has been enough. And I don't think that that communication is going to take a lot more work to get it out there. And I would highly recommend, obviously the Front Porch Forum is great. And I appreciated your Jay, what did you call it? I thought that was great. But I do think the Times Inc. is, whether people read it or not, that is probably the thing that goes into everyone's household. I get the Addison Independent. I grew up in Middlebury. I still get the Addison Independent because I want to read about kids doing sports, and I want to read about what's going on in town and what people are doing in town. And they have a police blog. Not that I go to that necessarily, but it is more than, if you look back at what our Town of Richmond police reports are, it's a very funny graph in 2022. It doesn't really say a whole lot. It's just sort of, everything gets kind of lumped into this chart that's not super informative, really. And again, does it need a lot of detail? No, but maybe a little bit more effort, I think, would inform the community on where things are happening, what's happening, how we're doing. And I think that's why there's a lot of maybe misunderstandings in a way that the public has about things. They see the cars there, nobody understands it. And then, people start talking. And I know it's been you've reported it has been a tough time, and for all those reasons, and you guys are doing a great job, but I agree. I think that has been the piece for me that I think has been missing for a long time, is that oversight, feeding some information to the public from all of the departments so we know what's going on. And I think it would be really, really helpful, and people would appreciate it a lot. So
Penny, I want to thank you for hanging in there to get to this point. So I'm glad you did, because what you heard, I don't know if we could repeat it exactly the same as what you heard before, but now we have a witness. So
yeah, and that is what you all said tonight. I was like, wow, if the whole town could hear that, I think I'm thinking of a few people in particular. What?
You're welcome to tell anyone and everyone.
Well, I will. No, and it makes me feel better. But not everybody can do what I just did tonight. So I'm, it's just what it is. And I think more people do want to help and be informed, but everybody just can't always commit big chunks of time. And right now I have some big chunks of evening time, so.
I think
Right.
that, that the fact that our meetings are recorded, and that people can go back and refer to them.
Oh.
Much more communication than we've had. in the
Well,
past.
absolutely,
Yes.
but not everybody has.
No, not everybody.
There is more that can be done.
Yeah, there's more that can be done. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Penny. Thank you for sticking it out. Okay, our last warrant item on the agenda before we get to warrants, purchase orders, et cetera, is a review of the planning and zoning monthly update. As many people know, but not everybody knows, our previous director of planning and zoning, Ravi Venkataraman, I think I pronounced that correctly, left us to go work for the city of Burlington in a field much more, transportation is his love, and that's where he's went. He didn't leave because we were not paying well enough or because he didn't like us. It was a plum job opportunity. We have filled that job with Keith Oborn, who's been with us for a few months now. And his report on what he's been up to between May 15th and June 15th is in the packet. Josh, would you like to kind of summarize or talk about or any of this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a report that Keith came up with as a way to communicate back to the select board and the public on the various commissions that he staffs. So it's a brief update on planning commission work, transportation committee, housing committee, DRB, as well as some additional comments about the work that he and the zoning administrative officer have been working on over the last month. His plan is to do this once a month and provided there's an update to the board. And if there's any additional follow-up questions, he's happy to dig in more if our.
One of the suggestions that I had when Josh and I first discussed this, I get emails from the state because I'm chair about all manner of Act 250 review. And there's, a lot of stuff going on, like there's a project that has been approved at Cochran's to replace the building. There's this happening over here, there's this happening over there. And we rarely have an occasion to discuss it because it's just the state notifying us of something they've done. But I'm sure most of us would probably like to know more about what that is. And so perhaps that could be included in this monthly report, stuff like that.
I did follow up with Keith on that. I forgot to follow back up with you. He can provide a link that kind of goes to all open Act 50 permits in Richmond. And so he'll include that in this thing. He said a lot of the time things that you're seeing are requests for more information from the applicant. But I think he said there's a web page where we can link to that you can just kind of go in and see this is what's happening in Richmond. And he'll include that in the reports.
We're statutory parties, aren't we, to Act 250?
Which is, I think, why we get all the updates, but a lot of them we don't have to do anything with. We're just being notified.
Yeah.
That they just need more information from the applicant, or this has been approved, or this is on the list.
Well, I was really impressed with this report. It was, he's doing a lot.
Yeah, it's busy in planning and zoning.
Got up to speed very quickly.
Good.
I was just thinking, and you probably said this or thought about it, that it doesn't have to be this detailed, but maybe quarterly updates from department heads, like what's happening the last quarter, what's coming up the next quarter might be useful. I was just contemplating this saying, maybe we need like a communications intern or would benefit, like a part-time college student, because it's not that complicated. It's like putting stuff together and dispersing it.
Kind of brute force.
And I think there's more communications than marketing per se. But maybe a step towards that is to ask, not a huge investment in time, like spend an hour or just write down what you did last quarter and what you plan to do next quarter. And it could go to the select board and be posted on our website. And just,
I don't know if that needs to be, somebody outside the department. I think that the department head it's useful for them to do. It's useful for you to know what they're planning on doing.
yeah, those are two not necessarily the same idea, just different ideas. And maybe to start with asking department heads to do a quarterly end of each quarter, like what happened last quarter, what's coming up.
And it would be helpful for evaluations as well.
Maybe a page, like, we're not looking for a dissertation here, right?
Right.
Is Diane Corbett still with us?
She is.
She's the police clerk, I guess. but-
Administrative assistant, yeah. So she works about 10 to 15 hours a week and paperwork mostly for the police doing some
She's
research.
filing stuff. to like the state or whatever?
Yeah, and I think follow up on like request for information, things like that.
Okay. Okay, I mean, is she available to do some of these kind of odd jobs or? does it have to be-
Potentially. I'm not sure exactly how much more she wants to work, but I could talk to her about it. and see.
Yeah.
And this
Maybe.
one was an example. I don't know how long it took them to do this, but I'm guessing it's not a huge amount of time. And then you sort of look at your calendar and say, what's.
Yeah, and actually, once the format is there, next month you go in and it's a little easier and a little easier, a little easier.
Okay, our thanks to Keith and we welcome more
Yeah.
such.
Mhm.
Okay, moving on in the agenda, we are now coming to minutes, warrants and purchase orders. First, let's go to the minutes of June 5th. Any comment, additions, corrections, deletions? Okay, can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Oh,
Can we have a motion from Lisa Miller, second by David Sander to approve the minutes of June 5th, 2023? Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
David, aye.
Bard, aye.
And J.I. I believe we have 3 purchase orders.
It's for.
Four?
let me share
Sorry.
Screen here, that's right.
Oh, yes, you're right.
I'd like
It
to
is 4.
Purchase a saltwater taffy from Josh.
Pass those around like
Still-
hot dog at a baseball game. There you go, pass it around.
Thank you again, Bart.
I'll do the seal thing.
Yeah, around the horn.
Okay, our first purchase order 4619. This is for highway gravel,
Oh, this is for granite curbing.
granite
that we'll
curbing,
be
sorry.
Using on East Main Street, once the project comes through. I think he initially looked at doing concrete curbing, but putting the granite curbing in actually allows for a little more flexibility on when he can put the curbing in, when they can pave, and when he can put the sidewalk in. So he's still gonna line things up.
Probably more durable too, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So it will increase cost a little bit, but I think it allows some more project timeline flexibility and it's more durable as well. So
And I think job of trashing rooms.
I think it's probably worthwhile that it's on Main Street as well, because Route 2, it's a state project, and it, that continues, that's what we have going up Jericho Road as well. It's nice, it's really quite nice.
So do we have a motion to approve this purchase order?
So move.
Sorry, second.
Okay, so purchase order 4619 to Swinson Granite Company in amount not to exceed $40,136.
Assuming that's real or not, granted.
can't guarantee that, but.
Find
most
granite
likely,
of
right? It's
Florida.
just down the road.
Okay, so who made the motion to approve?
I did.
Okay, and the
Lisa
motion
second.
from David Sanders, second from Lisa Miller to approve purchase order 4619 to Swinson Granite Company in an amount not to exceed $40,136. Please state your name and your vote.
Felicia, aye.
Aye. David, aye.
Bard, aye.
They're stuck.
And
together.
J.I. Okay, our next purchase order is for our property maintenance firm who does our mowing and stuff. This is purchase order 4635. It is for grounds maintenance in an amount not to exceed 10,000. Is that 10,000?
Yep,
$10,405.
Who is the vendor again?
Okay, mow and maintain. And this is for the FY 23, 2 months in FY 23. You're gonna bill us for.
Just put my glasses on. Yeah. Okay, got it. Thanks.
I might suggest that they look into some electric equipment, might be a little quieter. But I move to approve purchase order 4635 to mow and maintain property maintenance in the amount of $10,309.
This is David, I'll second.
Okay, we motion Jeff Ford, seconded by David Sander to approve purchase order 4635 to mow and maintain an amount not to exceed $10,305.
Did you say 309 or 305? It's a 5.
I said 309, but it's
My-
actually
I think it's
305.
305.
Excuse me.
My handwriting.
We meant 305.
I meant 305.
There we go.
knew it.
So I was just going to observe very quickly that I have moved to electric, like the mower and weed whacker, and they are way better than they were 5 or 10 years ago.
Okay,
So that's just an observation. I don't know what degree that's practical for these folks.
I would suggest particularly for leaf blowers,
Hmm.
so loud.
Then the other thing I'd say is I have seen evidence of trees being hit apparently at speed. and gouges, so that's something that we should ask them to avoid, and if and when it happens, there's probably a repair protocol or remedy, like if you take. If you-
Tar or something like that, yeah.
If you knock a 6-inch gouge off the bottom of a tree, like across here in the
Really good
grounds of
point.
the library. That it should be both seek to prevent that, and when it happens, that there's some action.
And not
Gotcha.
girdle the tree when they're weed whacking. That's a bad thing to do.
Okay,
I've had that happen in my place.
any other discussion before we vote? Okay, we have a motion to accept purchase order 4635. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, I,
Jeff,
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And J.I. Our next purchase order is for Hartsfield Health Systems Consulting. Purchase order 4636. This is for the Substance Misuse Prevention Special Project, an amount not to exceed $10,000.
Or misses the pass through of the grant from United Way.
This is a pass-through from the grant from United Way, so this is just making it legal.
So which purchase order is it?
4636.
Okay, there wasn't a motion, right?
No,
Okay, I move to approve purchase order 4636 to Hartsfield Health Systems Consulting in the amount of $10,000.
This is David, I'll second.
and we have motion from Jeff Ford, seconded by David Sander to approve purchase order 4636 to Hartsfield Consulting, an amount not to exceed $10,000. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, I,
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And J.I. Our last purchase order is purchase order 4640 to MMCTV. This was the money that we agreed to reimburse MMCTV for all the equipment in this room that they put in and paid for, in amount of $10,166.
I'll move we approve it, purchase order number
4640.
4640 for $10,166.
Bard, I'll second that.
We have a motion from Lisa Miller, seconded by Barb Hill, to approve purchase order 4640 to MMCTV for amount not to exceed $10,166. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, I,
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
J.I. Do we have a motion to approve the warrants as presented? Are there any comments or questions about the warrants?
This is David, move to approve.
second.
A motion from David Sander, seconded by Lisa Miller to approve the warrants as presented. Are there any questions about any of the warrants? Okay, seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, I,
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And J.I. Our next item on the agenda is items for the next agenda. We've already, of course, identified some.
Bunch of those police items probably at the front ideally. Maybe talk more about our communications plan or strategy,
yeah,
department head.
yeah,
That sort of was an undercurrent of a couple of things here.
exactly. I think exploring it, we'll find more.
Regarding the Tesla, putting the spinning rims and the racing stripes on the Tesla.
Hey, marking our cruisers is something that we should be doing. Somebody should be doing that.
Oh, the Tesla's.
As we did it.
Letters are the same colors.
Yeah, that's really.
Stealth.
Another one of our.
Stealth mark. It's a ghost mark.
Only shows up in X-rays.
Anything else for the agenda that people can think of?
We talked about inventory. The inventory thing is gonna take a while.
Yeah.
And so this would be kind of a long range, work plan. It falls on you, Josh, to implement, with department heads.
Probably engaging them in a conversation
Yeah.
as part of your department head
Yeah.
meetings, like.
And so
stuff
maybe,
that might be-
we don't need to have an update at our next meeting, but an update in a month or two of where we are with that, I think would be useful.
And we do have an interview for a water and sewer superintendent scheduled for next week. We've got the position posted. It has been for some time. And Josh, I know David went, why don't I know about this? Josh reached out to Morgan Wollover and myself because we had been involved the last time we had interviews. And we will update you on how that goes, I guess.
And water sewer commission.
Good idea.
And if there is a strategic plan for the police department, it would be lovely to have it in our packet.
Oh, you mean the Hinesburg one?
No.
Oh, you mean the old?
The hypothetical one.
The
that we picked.
hypothetical one. that I-
I don't know that we had a, not that I can remember from Walter. I mean, he wrote,
Well, let's see if we have.
he wrote the plan for the hiring committee.
Oh,
And then he
okay.
wrote like a
Rocket,
90-day
see what we
action
have.
plan, but it wasn't like a 5 to 10 year plan.
Okay.
Okay. But maybe then also related to this in preparation for the police conversation, it would like check in with the, I'm drawing a blank on the town manager and
It's Todd Odit.
what's the status of their strategic
Yeah.
plan?
That would be
And
useful.
can we get a copy of it? And when it's ready, it's, I think presumably a time to re-engage,
Yeah.
depending on what it says, in a conversation between Richmond and Hinesburg.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else that comes up, you know how to reach Josh. Our next item on the agenda,
Oh.
go ahead.
Sorry, I should have struck in that last, the possible executive session.
Unless somebody for some reason.
I'm
definitely wants to.
realizing that should not have been on there.
Okay, then our next item on the agenda is the question of whether we want to adjourn. Now, I can go either way, but
Let's go another round.
Why would we want to adjourn? Honestly, we're just getting warmed up.
That's a good meeting.
Yeah.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
motion from Jeff Ford, seconded by David Fenner to adjourn. Any discussion?
Lisa, I,
Okay, seeing none, state your name and your vote.
Good.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye.
Thank you, folks.
And now the best part of the night. We are adjourned.